soaring past the night to trace the primal light. Let the clouds heal me of the stains, gently wipe the sorrow off my life. I dream.
All right, good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get on started here. We are like 1 minute away from our usual start time. So I'm going to try to start on time this evening because we have a lot to talk about. CES is wrapping up. For those of you that don't know, this week was CES. So all the new hardware for graphics cards, for mobile devices, for monitors, pretty much all of the tech enthusiasts' gear has been revealed. as of this week. So we're going to break down a lot of that. We're going to go into the 50 series probably first, because I think that's the thing that's on the top of mind for most people watching this stream. But we're also going to talk about the new CPUs from AMD, because they did announce a whole lot of CPUs, not just mobile. They also announced the Ryzen 9 X3D for desktop, as well as Strix Halo. So we'll see to what capacity Strix Halo ends up showing up in not just mobile, but also like mini PCs or desktop PCs. So it'll be interesting to see that. And then we'll also talk about Intel stuff and some of the other things too, like the displays, the monitors, like the new world's first 27-inch 4K OLED 240 hertz from various monitor providers, but the panel they're using is the Samsung QD OLED. So we're going to break down all of this evening. So if you're new to the channel and you like this sort of free-form discussion, this is an open discussion, so if you have any questions, you can leave them in the chat. And that's pretty much it. Feel free to ask questions. Some of those questions go off into their own discussion, which ends up being a whole segment of this live stream. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. I guess we're going to talk about, let's just go straight into the RTX 50 series. So NVIDIA revealed the RTX 5090. So we now know exactly what it is. We know how much VRAM it has. We're not reliant on leaks anymore. Everything is out there. The price was revealed, which was very interesting. We are going to talk about price because the initial rumor was around $2,600. The most recent rumor leading up to the announcement was around $2,600. And I myself had been saying it would be around $2,499. And the reason why, my logic behind saying it would be about $2,500 is because that was the price of the RTX Titan. And it's been a long time since NVIDIA had an RTX Titan. The last Titan was from the Turing series, so that would have been the 20 series. So think of like the 2080 Ti. The RTX Titan was the full die from that family of GPUs. Since then, we have not had an RTX Titan. Now, the closest thing we had to the Titan has been the 3090, the 4090, and more specifically, the 3090 Ti. And the 3090 Ti, for those of you who do not remember, the MSRP of the 3090 Ti was $1,999. So they went back to their $2,000 price point for their flagship series. So like I said, I've been saying this for several months leading up to this event, this CES event, that the NVIDIA wants to repeat the 30 series. Like they want the success of the 30 series to be repeated this time around. Because what do I mean by that? The 30 series it started with the RTX 3080, and then the 3090, and then the other stuff from there. But the 3080 was the most popular graphics card from that generation. Most people desired a 3080. Most people did not care about the 3090. And partially it was because they did a couple of things. First of all, the 3080 was $699, so it's like $700, which has traditionally been NVIDIA's most expensive gaming part that is targeted toward the gamer crowd, like the premium gaming experience. It's typically always been that $699, maybe $749, $600 to $750. Traditionally, that's what it's always been. But after that, they kind of deviated from that with the 40 series because they priced the 4080 at $1,200 last generation, and that didn't really sit well with a lot of people. So that kind of upsold people to the more expensive 4090, which was $1,600 or $1,599, which was a $100 price bump over the previous 3090, which was $1,499. So I guess I should be using paint to illustrate this. But for the listeners out there, you probably understand what we're saying. So basically, the RTX 3080 has an MSRP, or had an MSRP of $699. This was a 10 gigabit graphics card, and this would have been in, well, it doesn't really matter the year at this point because it's, it's EOL. Then they had the RTX 3090, for $14.99. And this was, this was basically the majority of the 30 series generation. Then they had, oh, you guys aren't seeing it because, of course you aren't seeing it because of this. Okay, anyway, sorry about that. So here we go. So the RTX 3080 was $699. Then there was the $14.99 3090. So that's a huge difference in price between those two when you think about that. $700 versus $1,500. Yeah, that's an $800 differential. This is roughly $800 difference between these two parts. So that was a huge gap in price. So most people opted for the RTX 3080 in that generation. Now, we're ignoring the fact that it was near impossible to buy either one of these at regular MSRP because during that time, that is what is known to the tech enthusiasts, at least the ones that follow this channel, as the dark times in tech enthusiast history. This was the era of late 2020 and all throughout 2021 and the first half of 2022. This is known as the dark times. So most people couldn't buy these GPUs even if they could afford the MSRP of, say, the 3090. But the point still stands. The MSRP between them is about $800. So most people would opt for this. This would have been the smart buy. This was the optimal choice for most people that wanted a premium gaming PC to be paired up with a 1440p 144 hertz monitor at that time. That was the premium experience. You were typically on a 1440p monitor, high refresh rate, and it was either a IPS or it was a super low latency TN competitive gaming monitor. And that's pretty much what I was using at the time, and my GPU at the time was similar to these in performance. Now, I had an AMD card at the time. I had the 6900 XT in this era because these cards were basically impossible to get. So, unless you are a crypto miner, but that's completely different. So we're not going to talk about that. But anyway, later on, they released the true king of the 30 series, and that one was the 3090 Ti. Actually, before we get into that, we should talk about the 3080 Ti. The 3080 Ti had a price of $1199, and this GPU was launched in March of 2021, so it was in the midst of the dark times when it was impossible to buy anything. NVIDIA could have not even listed at MSRP. They could have said it was $3,000. They could have just picked some arbitrary number and no one would have cared because you couldn't buy the other cards at the MSRP in the first point, right? Like in the first place. You were stuck having to overpay if you were desperate and you wanted one of those 30 series cards. So they launched at $1199, which is not a random number. A lot of people don't understand. People are probably like, well, how come they chose this? Well, that's because they were repeating the price of the previous generation RTX 2080 Ti, which was also, at least if you were buying the Founders Edition 2080 Ti, the Founders Edition 2080 Ti was $1199. The MSRP, I think, on the actual, the generic, the fake MSRP that it never sold for was $999. But the real MSRP was $1199. And that's why they basically repeated that with the 3080 Ti in 2021. However, fast forward a year later, after the 3080 Ti, in the year of 2022, the year of Elden Ring and Miyazaki, our Lord and Savior, RTX 3090 Ti. And I just realized something. The RTX 3090 Ti launched the same month that Elden Ring launched, and that was Game of the Year. So it never occurred to me. But the 3090 Ti launched very late. In fact, this was the final graphics card to launch for the entire 30 series. In March of 2022, a long time after the 30 series had launched, because this was September of 2020. This was, I believe this was October of 2020 for the 3090. And then this one, I believe, is March of 2021, and this one was March of 2022. So these GPUs launched very far apart from the rest of the series. So I think NVIDIA wants to repeat the success of the RTX 30 series. Now, the one thing to note is that the pricing of these cards, there was a massive gap between the 3080 and the 3090, a difference of $800. And we're seeing a similar thing play out with the new 50 series graphics cards.
Hey, how long is the tubes on the ASUS Astral 5090? And do you think it will fit in the Lian Li Sup 01? Could you help me figure this out, Red Heart?
Yeah, most likely the Astral, you're talking about the liquid edition because you're mentioning the tubes. So you're talking about you're talking about the Astral that was announced at CES. So ASUS has two versions for those that don't know. We will talk about that later in the stream. We are going to actually look at all of the AIB cards that were shown off at CES. But I appreciate the super chat, but in general, it'll fit in most mid-tower cases. These radiators on these GPUs are designed to have tubing that is longer than the tubing on a CPU AIO. And the reason why it needs to be longer is because you have to remember the GPU sits further down. So like if this is a motherboard, imagine this is the case. This is the case. The motherboard goes, say, we'll just put it like here. So the motherboard sits in the case like this or something. Well, the power supply is down there, depending on the case. But let's just say for argument's sake, it's here. The power supply sits down here typically. So your CPU would be here. So if you have let's imagine you have an AIO for a CPU. The AIO, let's say you put a 360 up here. The tubes are going to be, like this. They're going to be like that, typically. Now, on a GPU, if you install a GPU like the Astral, let's say it goes here. So now the tubes on this have to be able to reach either, they either have to reach the front, so they'd have to go like this. Oops, I forgot to draw the radiator for that, but basically the radiator would go like this. You could, if you have the case, if you want to put it like this, you can. It depends on the case. You could mount it on the side like that. A lot of the newer cases are doing that. So you could do that, and then the tube would just basically be like this. Does that make sense? Assuming you have an AIO for the CPU. If you don't have an AIO for the CPU, you could put the GPU AIO up at the top of the case, or you could put it at the front on the intake. But in general, the tubing for a GPU liquid cooler is longer than the tubing on a CPU AIO. And that's because the manufacturer knows that the GPU sits further down in the case relative to the CPU, which sits higher up. Therefore, it needs to account for that, so it has longer tubing. But yeah, in general, as long as you have a modern case, and this applies not just to the Lian Li 01, but basically any case that can fit a 360 AIO, they're designed to fit both GPU and CPU coolers. So, yeah, it would either go up top, or it would go like this, or at the very front. Like, you could have one at the front as well. So there's three ways to do it. I would not put it at the bottom. You want it to be either at the side like this, or mounted up top. But usually, if you have a liquid cooler from the CPU, like, let's put it this way. If I was going to build a PC with the Astral, and I'm using an AIO for the CPU, the AIO for the CPU goes on the top, and the one for the GPU has to go either on the front or on the side. That's how I would do it. Now, you could do it the other way. Like, you could put the CPU on the front. You could put the GPU one up at the top. You could also run the GPU one. Like, I should not have drawn the lines. I should have drawn the GPU first. So, but basically, you could do this. So, like, if this is the GPU, you could make the tubes go up here. But the thing is, that assumes that there's enough space here for the tubes. Does that make sense? You could put that like that, and then the CPU one would be like this. So you have multiple ways to do it. Does that make sense? It really is just going to depend on, like, what angle are you going to be looking at the computer most of the time, so you don't want the tubes in the way. Because if you put the tubes, like, in the back, like at the rear of the case, it won't be blocking the view of all this stuff. If you have the tubes running like this, and then you have, I don't know, maybe the CPU. I don't think the CPU one would go this way. There'd be too much bending, but I could be wrong. But I think the tubes would go like that. So then you have all these tubes over here. So that's not a very good look. But it really just depends on how you want it to look. Some people don't care because they put the computer on the floor. So they kind of want to see, they're basically going to look at the PC from like this angle. They're going to see it from this angle, like diagonal downward, instead of looking at it directly from the side. Like if it's on the desk, for example, then they're literally looking at this part of it most of the time. So it really just depends on where the PC is going to be located, and are you using a CPU AIO in addition to the one on the Astral? Because if you're using like an air cooler on the CPU, then you have the freedom to choose where to put the Astral's AIO. Okay. So that was a good question, because I think that there was probably a bunch of people that are probably thinking similar things, like what case should they go with, or will the radiator fit? So as long as the case supports a 360 AIO, it will fit. The tubes are designed to fit. They're designed to be long enough to fit any case that supports a 360 millimeter radiator. Okay, but so now let's fast forward to the 50 series. So the RTX 5090 is going to be $1999. That's the starting price. That's the MSRP. So just like what we've listed here. And then the RTX 5080 is $999. And then, do we need to talk about the others? I don't think we need to talk about the others right now, because my original comparison was to these, so we'll stick with that. So here, we're looking at an increase in the delta. So NVIDIA is increasing the delta by $200. So there is now there is a $1,000 difference between the RTX 5090 and 5080. So before, most people desired the 3080 because they didn't want to pay $800 more for the 3090. I think we're going to see a similar scenario with this 50 series generation. I think a lot of people are going to look at the price, the starting price of these graphics cards, and they're going to be like, this is too much money. I don't think it's worth the additional $1,000. Literally, they have to pay twice the amount of money. Literally, for the same amount of money, they could buy two RTX 5080s. But instead, for $1,000 more, they get a single 5090. So I think most people are probably going to prefer the RTX 5080. I personally think that is going to be the superstar of this generation, of the 50 series generation. And that's going to become more true once we start seeing how these GPUs stack up to the RTX 40 series and 30 series cards. Because, you know, Jensen Huang got on stage. We all know the infamous RTX 5070. Faster. Well, no, he didn't say faster. He said equal to an art. Did he say faster? Or did he say? I think he said equal. Equal to an RTX 4090 for $549. You guys remember that? RTX 5070. Performance of an RTX 4090 for $549. In quotes. This was the most controversial statement at all of CES 2025. This is the definition, this is the defining moment. The defining moment of CES at that keynote. Crymore, thanks for the sub. Welcome to the channel. So this will go down in history as the most infamous statement from the keynote address. So a lot of people are going to misunderstand this because after that, he said only possible, or did he say this is impossible? Impossible without AI. Without AI. So what this means is that the RTX 5070 can match the RTX 4090 by utilizing frame gen. Frame gen. Turn on that frame gen. It's all about frame gen. That's the future. So NVIDIA, like I said, I've been saying this literally for over a year now. Ever since DLSS got frame gen. And ever since AMD like finally got FSR 3 frame gen out the door. Because it took them like a whole year to do it after they announced it. So frame gen is the future. Whether you like it or not, fake frames is the future of gaming. And you know what? I've heard, I read a lot of comments on this. I read a lot of comments on this topic, this whole like fake frames.
Do we need a 5.0 riser cable to come out to get a better performance for vertical mount?
So currently as to my knowledge, there are no Gen 5 riser cables. At least no trusted good ones. So they may exist. You may be able to buy ones that are like advertised as 5.0 capable off of like Alibaba or AliExpress or something. I don't know if they're gonna actually work reliably, especially with a true Gen 5 GPU, like an RTX 50 series, for example. So I guess to answer your question, I don't think currently there are no like well-known, well-reputable Gen 5 riser cables. But in terms of better performance for vertical mount, technically speaking, you're not really going to lose too much performance if you're still on Gen 4. But if you want if you literally just want your GPU Z to tell you you're running Gen 5 at Gen 5 x16, you're probably going to need to get a Gen 5 riser cable, assuming you're going to vertically mount the GPU. So that being said, currently there are no computer cases that are sold today, that exist today on the market, that you can buy that come with 5.0 riser cables. So the only way at launch to get the full Gen 5 bandwidth is to connect your GPU directly to the motherboard. So, but I appreciate the question. I think that's another good question that a lot of people are probably also wondering. But currently, there are no Gen 5 riser cables. There are no cases that have Gen 5 riser cables that come with them or are orderable as option. So, that's the thing. Because see, here's the thing, guys. A rando can start selling 5.0 riser cables on Amazon, and you know what? They can sell them. They could probably be selling them for like 2 years now, 3 years now. And the reality is nobody can prove that they're actually Gen 5 until they can get a 50 series card or an AMD 9000 series card. So people could have been selling like fake Gen 5 cables and no one would be able to prove that they're not real Gen 5 cables until next month. So I'm not going to be the guinea pig. I'm not going to go and buy some rando's Gen 5 cable and try to test that with a super expensive graphics card, if you know what I'm saying. So, yeah, good luck trying to find one of those. Eventually, they will come out. But as of today, none of them exist. Or none of them are reliable, or none of them are well... there's no reputable brand that I can list that I can guarantee has Gen 5 riser cables. So, that's more of like a future thing. But that's a great question, though. Because there's probably people that plan to do a vertical mount build. And okay, so I would assume they're going to be expensive though. Like if someone sells a 5.0 riser cable for like $20 or something, I don't know if that's actually going to work. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. That's kind of a tough one. But anyway, so the performance of the RTX 5070 matches the 4090 thanks to FrameGen. And here's the thing. NVIDIA is going full steam ahead on FrameGen. The whole like multi-frame generation X4 technology is the differentiating factor. So what do you get if you buy a 50 series card that you can't use on the 40 series? Multi-frame gen. That's basically it. That's like the only feature you're missing out on. So I feel like for most people, for those of you that are on the 40 series, this 50 series is looking more and more like a complete skip. It's looking like a complete skip. Because for those of you on 40 series cards, because you're literally not missing out on anything unless you really, really want multi-frame gen. If you just gotta get more of that frame gen, because you love frame gen, you love those fake frames, those synthetic frames, then that's the main selling point of the 50 series card. So I don't know. It's gonna. I personally think it's gonna be a tough sell for like people who are on 40 series. There's only a few individuals that I can think of that would be that would actually benefit from upgrading. The vast majority of people that are on 40 series cards are going to waste a lot of money if they upgrade. I'm being fully transparent with that. So the only feature is frame gen. You're not missing out. There's no, like, that's the gimmick this time around. Last time it was frame gen. Now it's multi-frame gen. So, yeah, that's the thing. So 30 series, 40 series, they're still going to benefit from the newer software, like the Transformers thing, which I think is a more interesting, that's a more interesting technology. And I applaud NVIDIA for once actually, like, adding a new feature that their customers who are on older NVIDIA cards can actually use for once, instead of feeling like they're left behind and they have to buy into this new card, this new generation, because they want the new gimmick. You know, like now the gimmick isn't really that much of a gimmick compared to what they had last time. So, yeah, I think most people are probably going to either buy the 5080 or they're just going to skip it. The true enthusiasts are probably going to go for the 5090, but let me say another thing here. So, who should buy the RTX 5090? And we kind of covered this on Monday when we were covering NVIDIA's live stream. But for those of you that didn't watch the live stream coverage on Monday, we'll ask the question again. Who should buy the RTX 5090? Realistically, in my opinion, this is my opinion, but there is a criteria that basically think of it like a job application. This is basically a job application. You have to meet certain requirements to qualify to be able to buy a 5090. If you don't meet these qualifications, you shouldn't buy a 5090. You're wasting your money. You're literally throwing money in the trash. Okay? So, and that's a lot of money to throw in the garbage. Just saying. So, number one, the first requirement for this job application to be applicable or to be eligible to own an RTX 5090 is you must have a 4K monitor. This is like requirement number one. If you don't have a 4K monitor, you automatically fail and you can't be hired. You fail the filter test for the interview. It's that simple. If you don't have a 4K monitor, you automatically fail. So, number 2, you must have at least $2,200. Like, this is the number 2 requirement. And the reason why you need $2,200, well, unless you live in other countries outside the US price doesn't include the tax. So for those of you in the US and you really want to spend $2,000 on this, it's going to be more than $2,000 because, first of all, if you're buying a ASUS Astral, let me tell you something. Spoiler alert, the Astral is going to cost more than $2,200. So if you don't have at least $2,200, you won't even be able to afford like the basic 5090. You know what I'm saying?
Mimi have a godlike.
You have to have a godlike? Well, I don't know about that. Like, okay, that's gonna be like nice to have. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just thinking about like how a job application is structured. You know, like the job listing will have a bunch of like requirements, and then it'll have nice to haves. So, like, nice to have, like, okay, preferred candidate. Preferred candidate A should have well, we won't say godlike specifically, that's too specific. God tier motherboard. You have to have a God tier motherboard. Basically, you have to have a flagship motherboard from any of the motherboard manufacturers. You can't have some low end, you know, like, so for example, it must have a postcode debug. Like, that's just one, I won't put that in there, but you know, like, you should have a God tier motherboard. If you don't have a God tier motherboard, like, that doesn't mean that you can't get a 5090, but it's like you're not a preferred candidate to own a 5090. You know what I'm saying? So, like, yeah, the Hero is a top tier motherboard. And, what would be like another nice to have for someone to get a 5090? Should have at least 3 monitors. Like, at least 3 monitors, one of which must be a 4K monitor. You know what I'm saying? Like, 3 multi-monitors. Or you have to have, like, a super ultra wide. You know? So, but anyway, this is basically, like, requirements.
Send 100 donation and I will believe you have it.
Send 100 donation and... Is that a preferred candidate requirement? I'm not sure what you mean. You need a fat CPU? Oh, that's good. That was going to be in the requirements. Must have top tier gaming CPU. Or let's just say must have a CPU less than 2 years old. The CPU must be less than 2 years old. If the CPU is more than the latest generation, it's already going to be bottlenecking the GPU. Especially because you can turn so much frame gen on. You know what I'm saying? So basically, these are the requirements. And these, I don't think these are insane requirements. You know, like some people have like 5K monitors and stuff. So I don't think this is too much to ask. This is basically baseline requirements. So if somebody doesn't have these 3 things, they should not consider a 5090. First of all, if you don't have enough, like, if you don't have $2,200, you definitely should not buy an RTX 5090. Don't buy this on a credit card that you can't, like, pay off within the next month or 2. That's why I'm saying, when I say $2,200, I'm saying you have to have at least $2,200 in a savings account. I'm not saying, oh, you have to have like a credit card that you can. No, I'm saying you have to actually have the cash. If you don't have the cash, do not buy a 5090. That is a bad use of money. To borrow money to buy a 5090 is a very bad idea, and that is not recommended. So that automatically fails. But 4K monitor, you have to have a 4K monitor. Like, if you're not using a 4K monitor, then you should not have a 4090. I mean, a 5090. So these are kind of like, in my opinion, these are what I consider like the benchmark. Like if I was interviewing a candidate for an RTX 5090, they would have to pass at the very least these 3 criteria. If they cannot pass any one of these, they automatically fail and not eligible. So that's kind of a hard requirement. So because the Astral's going to cost more than $2,200, guys. The Astral's probably going to be like a $2,500 graphics card, if we're being serious here. And that leads me to another thing. Let's talk about the actual 5090 and the AIBs. Because there are a couple of interesting things about these graphics cards. So number one, the Founders Edition card is extremely small. It is extremely small, and yet nvidia is saying that this is a 575 watt TBP, total board power. 575 watts. So when PC World interviewed the director of the product engineering at nvidia, there's a video on YouTube about that, and that man confirmed that this thing can pull that much power. He said it can do that. When he said that, I immediately started thinking, okay, that means that the Founders Edition is the one to not get, because this thing is too small to handle 575 watts. In fact, this GPU, this physical size, is way too small to handle even 350 watts. Now, I know they've got the full flow-through design, and the fan on the back does the full flow-through just like the one in the front. But let me tell you something. 3080 Ti is a little bit smaller than this, and they're the same thickness. The Founders Edition 3080 Ti is horribly loud. It is horrendously terrible to listen to while gaming. The fan sounds like a jet engine, and that's because it is a 2-slot cooler, and it is a 350 watt graphics card. Now, this thing is a 575 watt graphics card. And when he said it's 575 watts, and I looked at that cooler, I was like, yeah, that means this card is going to be one of the worst performing 5090 graphics cards. There is physically not enough metal to handle 575 watts, let alone 450 watts. Because when they said 575 watts, I was like, my eyebrows were like, no, dude, I don't feel comfortable running 575 watts on a 2-slot cooler that does not have a radiator or any liquid. Like, this is bad. This is not a good design. I don't care what nvidia says. I don't care like how much hours their engineers put into this. Like, yes, it's a nice looking design, but from a TDP standpoint, it is way too much power dissipation for this tiny little graphics card. Like, it's not a good experience. This is going to end up being really loud, and it's going to be very bad. It's going to be probably one of the worst performing RTX 5090s out of all of them. You compare this to... Now we can start looking at the AIBs. Where is ASUS? Where did I know I opened that tab somewhere? ASUS? No, this one. ASUS? ASUS? ASUS. Okay. You compare it to this. This is a quad slot. This is a thick boy 4-slot. This is like 3.6 slots. 4-slot. We can call it a 4-slot cooler. This cooler is super thick, and it has 4 fans. So it has full pass-through on the 3rd fan, and on the backside, there's literally another fan. So this card will handle 575 watts a whole lot better than the Founders Edition. It doesn't take an engineer to figure that out. You literally can look at it and you're like, okay, this thing has a lot of surface area. It has a lot of mass. It has like thermal mass, a lot of density. This thing can actually dissipate 500, we'll say 600 watts. This looks like it can handle 600 watts. Meanwhile, this looks like it can barely handle 350 watts. This could probably handle close to 400 watts. But I don't think this can handle 575 watts. This is going to be very bad. So either this is going to be very, very loud. I'm talking the fans are going to be spinning like 2,500 RPM, maybe 3,000 RPM, if you're trying, especially if you're trying to overclock it. And I would never overclock this. Like this is a card that you literally, like if you buy the Founders Edition, you buy the Founders Edition because you're not going to overclock it. You're going to run it bone stock forever. And you're never going to mess with the fan profile. You're never going to mess with anything. It's like a set it and forget. It's like literally buying an Apple phone. You buy it, you use it, you don't think of tweaking it, you don't mess with it, you don't touch it, you plug in the power cable one time, and you never unplug and replug and unplug and replug because you're going to raise the risk of the fire hazard by doing that. So no, this is a set it and forget it and never mess with it GPU. If you're somebody who is a true enthusiast, this generation, you're going to want to go to an AIB card because these things are the real deal. And I really think that NVIDIA, for once, they have given the AIB partners a chance to outperform NVIDIA's own reference design because they set the TDP so high at 575 watts that hence why all the other AIBs are making these chungus, gigantic, enormous coolers. They're making the thick boy brick.
Thick buoy buriek.
The thick boy brick. You beat me to it. They're gonna make... Everybody is making thick boy bricks for a reason, people. There's a reason why they're making these really thick cinder block coolers. It's called 575 watt TBP. If somebody thinks this scrawny little twig can handle 575 watts, they never owned a 3080 Ti. They never owned a 3080 Ti. We got GPUs. We got GPUs here. Okay? This is going to be the rant for the stream. You guys remember this card? 3080 Ti. Founders Edition. Guess what? Guess what? 3080 Ti. In the metal. This thing looks almost the same as the 5090. It is thin. It's a twig. It's a 2-slot. It's a 2-finger design. It even has the power plug vertical, just like the 5090. And you know what? This thing, god awful, terrible, super loud. It can cause hearing loss if you sit by it in game for 8 hours a day. It is terrible, disgraceful, horrendous. And you know what? This thing only pulls 350 watts. 2-slot design can't even handle 350 watts. Can't even handle 350 watts.
Hard 2-finger twig.
Exactly. It's a hard 2-finger twig. Like, I'm 100% serious. Guess what? We have something else over here. You see this thing? GeForce RTX 3090 Ti. 3090 Ti. Founders Edition. Throw that box on the floor. Check this out. This one's the thick boy. Look at this. 3090 Ti. This one is a triple finger. This is a 3-finger. See that? It's got 3 fingers. This thing is a triple slot. This is a thick boy. This is a thick boy. So we got thick boy here, and we got skinny twig, 2-finger twig right here. 2-finger twig, thick, triple finger, thick boy. So I got a thick boy, and skinny twig. Guess what? Skinny twig can't even handle 350 watts. Terribly loud, induces hearing loss. Awful, awful, awful cooler. So when I saw Jensen show a 2, he was like, he got on stage and he was like, yeah, gamers, yeah, 5090, 2-slot, beautiful 2-slot. When he saw that, I was like, you know what I was doing? Facepalm. Are you serious? Are you stupidly doing a 2-slot? And then they have the audacity, 575 watts?
Innuendos to the max. Mommy like it.
Well, I don't see it that way because we're literally talking about graphics cards. But for real, he is advertising beautiful 2-slot, skinny twig. And I'm thinking this is awful news because I have this stupid skinny twig and it can't handle 350 watts. Meanwhile, they make another 2 skinny twig and it's 575 watts. So it's like, okay, well that completely invalidates the fact that it's full flow through and beautiful because it's going to underperform. It's going to underperform. This is probably going to be one of the worst 5090s. Which is a good thing for the AIBs, because it means that this time around, unlike last generation, where NVIDIA's 4090 cooler was so good that it was like setting the standard for everyone else to follow. Now, they're like, oh, look, we made this cool looking Apple product, but it's completely ineffective. So only time will tell. What I can tell you guys is probably... my guess is, knowing how NVIDIA is, they will make it so that the Founders Edition card runs at stock at acceptable noise levels. Meaning it's not going to be terrible. I would not think this is going to be super loud. Otherwise, it'll make NVIDIA look really bad. However, if you overclock, the moment you try to overclock the 5090 Founders Edition, it will become a jet engine that induces hearing loss. So this is one of those like stock only, no overclock. Like I wouldn't be surprised if they literally locked down the voltage on the VBIOS for this. Because this is completely inadequate. I don't care if they're using liquid metal. No one cares that they're using liquid metal. It's not going to help. It's literally a 600 watt card, 575 watts, and the stupid thing is it's a skinny twig. A twig can't handle 600 watts. It can't handle 550 watts. In fact, this thing can't even handle 500 watts. So, unless NVIDIA's doing that thing that they always do, where it's like, they tell you it's like a 450 watt TDP, like on the 4090, but in reality, at stock, it's like 325 watts, 350 watts most of the time. Unless you overclock it, unless you max the power limit. You know what I'm saying? So unless it's one of those things where it's like, oh, it's 575 watts, but in reality, it's only like 360 watts or something, then this thing will be fine. But if it's truly that much power, this twig is a joke. It's garbage. Avoid it like the plague. Do yourself a favor and get something like this.
500 watts to get wrecked. Get wretched.
I like the way that it doesn't know how to read that properly. Yeah, 500 watts or get wrecked.
You warned us. Don't drink the Kool-Aid from the guy in the gator jacket.
The gator jacket. Yeah, somebody in the Discord posted like the actual jacket that Jensen was wearing. Do you guys know how much that gator jacket costs? You know how much that jacket cost him? the retail price on that jacket? That's like a $8,000 jacket. And it was hilarious because he was like, you guys like my jacket? Like, that was the first thing he said. Was like, you guys like my jacket? And then later on, he was like, 4090, yeah, you guys with your 4090s in your $10,000 PCs. Your $10,000 PCs. And I'm thinking, like, when he said $10,000 PCs, I was like, he's really trying to downplay the cost of the 4090. Because who is running a $10,000 PC? Like, how many people in the crowd, like, even if there was those few enthusiasts that have $10,000 setups, like, how many people in the actual audience have $10,000 PCs? Like, who exactly was he talking to when he said that? And then the whole jacket thing, you guys like my jacket? Was like, well, if you don't, you need to get used to it. Like, what? Okay, anyway, around $9,000. It was like an $8,000 something jacket, and he was telling people they have their $10,000 PCs. I'm like, what? I guess if they're running like a Mac.
10K in debt PC from NXT.
Oh, Jesus, yeah, no. Oh, yeah, no, we're not going to talk about NZXT on this stream. Let's not even go there. Oh, man, yeah. Well, see, you know, the funny thing is, I was just thinking, like, $10,000 PCs. I was like, is he talking about, like, someone who uses Apple? Like an Apple desktop? And I'm like, the people that are using Apple desktops don't have 4090s. They're using, like, Apple for the GPU. Like, what? Anyway, we're getting way sidetracked on that. The point that I'm making is, guys, this is not a good... This time around, I think NVIDIA's Founders Edition is actually not the best choice. And I'm being 100% serious. And you guys know me. I am somebody who traditionally only buys NVIDIA Founders Editions. 3080 Ti, 3090 Ti, 4080 Super, 4090 Founders Edition. So I've got like 4 Founders Edition cards. And what I can tell you, the absolute worst one is the Skinny Twig. The Skinny Twig is garbage tier. It's nice to look at as a museum set piece, but it is terrible to actually use from a usability standpoint. Yeah, no, I do not recommend. This time around, it's looking like if you can't get a Founders Edition, it's not a big deal. You're not really missing out. I think the better ones, the better performing ones this time around are definitely going to be the thick, chonky, triple and quad slot ones. These are the ones that can actually handle the rated TDP. And I think if you really, really want one of these, you're going to be more satisfied with a giant traditional, triple slot or quad slot or 3.5 or whatever these things are. Basically, you're going to be much better off with these giant things. If also, think about it like this. You're spending that much money. Do you really want the GPU to sound like a jet engine or to be, let's say, audible while using it? Like, I wouldn't. Like, seriously, I want the GPU to be quiet. If I'm paying $2,000 plus on a GPU, that thing better be dead silent while playing any of the games, even with frame gen maxed out, even at 4K max settings, ray tracing maxed out in Cyberpunk 2077. This thing better be dead silent while gaming. So, I do not think this can handle 575 watts. Only time will tell. Obviously, the reviewers will show the truth, but from literally just visually looking at it, as someone who has a Skinny Twig Founders Edition GPU on a 350 watt GPU, I can tell you it's terrible, it's garbage. In fact, the only one that's good is the triple slot. So like the 4090 one. That's the only one that's good out of these meaning if the Founders Edition was a thick boy, it would be fine. So I don't know why they went with this skinny little thing. So I guess who should get the Founders Edition? For the 5090, I don't think the Founders Edition is a good idea. However, if you want the 5080, the 5080 comes with the exact same cooler, and the 5080 is a 360 watt TDP. So personally, if I was going to get the 5080, I would get the Founders Edition because it looks really good. But if I want the 5090, I'm probably not going to get the Founders Edition because this one does not look like it can handle 575 watts. Waterblock boys are going to avoid this thing like the plague. You know why? Because this thing has 3 separate PCBs. And if you're going to remove the cooler, you do not want 3 individual PCBs just floating around on the water block. No. The water block is most likely... I would be surprised if there's literally no water block. Like, if no one makes a water block for the Founders Edition, I would be totally okay with that. Because this thing's got way too many circuit boards. There is a circuit board for the PCIe slot. There's a circuit board for the GPU. There's a circuit board for the power thing. There's the LED strip. Nah, man, it is way too the LED doesn't matter, but still, it's not gonna work.
Thick boy can't handle twig boy. Sad voice is sad.
Yeah, the thick boy can't handle the twig boy. No, the twig is inadequate for 575 watts. They have water blocks for this, but who would buy this to take this apart? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's much easier to buy like one of these and take this apart. Like, if I was gonna do water block, I would not buy the Founders Edition. Just saying. Like, it's too complicated to take apart. This is kind of like a set piece, and there's the PCIe on its own little circuit board. It's just too much trouble. There's too many points of failure on this that I think most people are probably not... Like, if you want a water block, this is... I just don't see how this would work. I don't know. Maybe the water block vendor has all the necessary things to, like, hold the PCIe board, and it's going to have to be at a 90-degree angle and all this stuff. I think it's just too much trouble, to be honest, for that. So this is definitely not the one to get if you want to put a water block on it. No, you definitely want to buy probably an MSI or an ASUS or something like that. But the thing is, there's already like really good AIOs for the other ones. And this has those long tubes. So, like someone asked earlier about that. Yeah, I honestly really think the AIBs are probably the better choice. For 5090, the AIBs look like they're the smarter choice. This to me is very sus because it's too small. For 5080, this is fine. This is probably fine for 5080. But for 5090, this is questionable. Are we avoiding Gigabyte? No, we're going to look at them. We'll look at Gigabyte here in a little bit. So let's finish looking at ASUS. So out of all the ASUS ones, I really like the look of the Astral. The Strix looks okay, but I really do like the Astral. Do you know what graphics card the Astral reminds me of? This reminds me of the AMD reference 6900 XT. This looks a lot like the AMD 6900 XT. It's just more square and it's thicker. That's the only difference. This looks a lot like the old 6900 XT. The color scheme, like the silver with the black, that is very much like AMD RDNA 2 reference coolers in terms of the aesthetic. So this is probably my favorite one out of all the AIBs from ASUS. I think I really like the Astral air cooler, this one, with the fan on the back. It won't make a difference because it's not enough. It's physically not enough metal. It's physically not enough metal. Anyone who understands the laws of thermodynamics knows that this is completely inadequate for a near 600 watt TDP. Yeah, liquid metal is not going to make a difference. No. So these are still going to outperform because these are, like, especially like with this, I don't really know how much the fourth fan helps, but this is actually a really good design. So that one's good. The AIO will also do very good. This literally has a 360 AIO. In fact, I can't remember the last time I saw. This might actually be the first time I've ever seen a liquid cooled graphics card that has a 360 AIO. I'm familiar with the 240s and the 280 AIOs on GPU all-in-ones. I've never seen a 360 AIO for a GPU before. But see, this is very telling. Because if they're putting a 360 AIO and a Chongus Cinder brick for the 5090, meanwhile, NVIDIA is doing like scrawny, like this thing doesn't lift apparently. So it's like, no, like this raises some eyebrows in terms of like, is this thing adequate? Because everyone else is going with Chongus thick boys and cinder blocks and big radiators. Like, and they're going to say 575 watts. So it's like, I kind of think you might want to follow the majority on this one in terms of the cooler's design. So let's look at another one. MSI. No, what is this? MSI's liquid cooling one? Hold on. There was like a whole bunch of articles on these earlier. Let's get past this one. Let's find the MSI 5090s. Okay, we'll go to video cards and do that this way. Radeon. What's up with all the Radeon stuff? We'll look at Radeon in a little bit. There's so much Radeon and AMD all of a sudden. Pre-orders for the 9070. ASRock. Okay, well, apparently they want us to stop talking about the NVIDIA cards. But I gotta finish looking at the other AIBs. So, Gigabyte. Okay, Gigabyte has... What did they do? They messed something up. Why am I unable to find the pictures from CES of all the other AIBs? 5080 with incorrect. Why is everybody talking about MSI displaying the wrong memory spec? Mistakenly, no one cares. Everyone knows what the memory spec is. That's old news. ASUS reveals Astral. MSI. Okay, here we go. Okay, MSI. MSI is kind of like the replacement to EVGA now. So, Supreme Liquid. They've got Supreme Liquid. Look at that. Another big 360 AIO. The Supreme. And they're talking about all this stuff. Advanced vapor chambers. They're using advanced vapor chambers with redesigned core pipes. They're doing the shark fin on the aluminum fin stack for quieter cooling. But here's where they screw up. They're calling it perfect for 8K gaming. Perfect for 8K gaming, AI training, and content creation. It's like, why did they have to say 8K gaming? Why can't they just say 4K gaming? Like, really? Do you see now why I said that the bare minimum for eligibility for this product is a 4K monitor? Because these guys are saying, like, 8K gaming. You know what I'm saying? Like, what? It's getting kind of ridiculous. They did introduce the new Vanguard series. So the Vanguard series is apparently not their highest end, which is kind of weird because why would you introduce another brand that's not your new top brand? So anyway, Vanguard is like their new thing, and this literally looks like it would match with an MSI Carbon motherboard in terms of the aesthetic. It also could fit with the Godlike, depending on like whether you're vertical mounting this or not. Then they have the Gaming Trio. The Gaming Trio has been around for a number of years now, going as far back as, I believe, the 20 series.
Do you recommend 4080 or 4094 2K monitors?
Yes. Either one of them is fine for 1440p. Yeah. You're not so like for 1440p, in fact, you could even go with even like 4070 Ti and even like 7900 GRE, 7900 XT. All of those cards would be totally fine for that resolution. So, but yeah, that's a good question because some people are probably wondering about that themselves. For 1440p, when you say 2K monitor, I assume you mean 1440p. Technically speaking, 2K is actually not 1440p, but most people just say that. It's almost like saying 2K is like a slang way of referring to 1440p, even though technically that's not correct. But anyway, I assume you're talking about 1440p. So for 1440p, either of those GPUs is more, especially the 490, that's more than enough. That's more than enough. And then they have the Ventus. The Ventus is their entry level. So this is the one that is going to be at MSRP. So if you don't want to spend more than $2,000, like if you want to spend at MSRP for the RTX 5080 or 5090, the Ventus is the choice from MSI because these are the ones that will match MSRP. According to MSI, Ventus will equal MSRP. Anything that's not Ventus will be more expensive than MSRP because these are considered premium brands. The higher up you go, the Trio. So, okay, if we're talking 5090, the Ventus, this one will be $2,000. This one will be $2,100. This one will be $2,250. So $2,049 if I had to guess. And this one will be probably close to $2,500. Maybe this one will be $2,300, $2,400. And the water cooler one will be the most expensive one because that one has the radiator. So, I don't know. Somewhere around there. These are not going to be MSRP though. Like Supreme is going to be way more expensive than MSRP. So only the Ventus will be at MSRP. They have said that. So if you want an MSRP RTX 50 series card, you need to buy a Ventus because these will be at MSRP. Everything else won't. The Inspire, this one will be $50 more. So this one will be $2,049. The Supreme Liquid will be very expensive. This is probably like $2,400. This one will be probably $2,350, somewhere around there, if I had to guess. So these are going to be very, very expensive GPUs. Hence why I said earlier, you got to have $2,200 minimum to be eligible. Otherwise, you can't play. So anyway, that is MSI. If we go back here to, let me see if I can just find these 5090 articles. So, Cooler Master. Oh, for pre-builds. ASUS. We just looked at ASUS. Oh, did we look at all of ASUS? Oh yeah, we didn't look at the rest of them. So, the Strix is actually pretty cool looking. And then they also have the TUF, which actually does have a nice aesthetic, and then they have the Prime. So they actually have a lot. They got a lot of choices. But Astral is going to be the flagship, so that's going to be the most expensive one. Then they have Strix, then they have TUF, then they have Prime, in that order. So the one that will be at MSRP is probably going to be the Prime. So if you don't want to pay more than MSRP, get the one that is on the left over here. This one will be $2,000. Everything else, the TUF will be probably $2,050 or $2,100. The Strix will probably be $2,200 something or whatever, and then the Astral will probably be $2,500. And maybe the Liquid will be $25 or $26. I don't know, somewhere around there. I would imagine $3,000. I don't know. I don't know if it'll be $3,000. See, the only way that these GPUs can get away with being $3,000 is if the Founders Edition card is so power limited that it underperforms. And by running these cards closer to the TDP of 575 watts, they can pull far ahead of it in benchmarks, then they can price it at like $3,000. So it's really going to come down to like, how do they compare to the Founders Edition at the MSRP? Because this one will be $2,000. This is baseline. Founders Edition is baseline. So this is a $2,000 one. But I don't think this is the best one. This is probably going to be one of the worst ones. So, although this is probably nicer to look at than like a Prime. Okay, so that covers ASUS and MSI. Now we need to go back and look at Gigabyte. Gigabyte. There's the water one. Well, where's like all of them? ZOTAC. No, that's leak. Alright, well, let's just look at... no, that's old. Hold on, where is... Gigabyte. Why are those search results so bad? Like, why do they come up with stuff from like years ago? AORUS RTX 5090? 2 years ago? Like, what is up with WCCF Tech search? It's like so broken. We're probably gonna have to go find like the videos or something, unless Tech Power Up has them. Here we go. Okay, Gigabyte shows off custom GeForce RTX 50 series designs. Here we go. So Gigabyte's doing a water block for their AORUS card. They've got the... This is the regular Gigabyte. Then they have the Eagle. No, these two are the Eagle. So the Eagle comes in white or gray. And when it comes to MSRP, Gigabyte's Eagle will be at MSRP. So if you want a $2,000 5090, you can buy a Gigabyte Eagle or an MSI Ventus or an ASUS Prime. All three of those that I just mentioned will be at MSRP. They will match the Founders Edition in terms of the price point. The rest of them will be more expensive though. So if you want RGB, if you want more style, you want better cooling, you want a thick cinder block in your computer, then you're going to have to pay more than MSRP to do that. So, I don't know what this one is. This one is... I don't know what this one is. This is like the gaming X, I think. And then this one is the AORUS... Is that the AORUS Master? Or is that the AORUS Elite? The AMD one is the AORUS Elite, so maybe that one's the Master? These are, like, terrible pictures. Whoever took these pictures, like, they don't know how to take pictures. Okay, I guess this one is the AORUS Master? Is this the highest end one? This one says AORUS on it. Maybe that one is the AORUS Master. The AORUS Master will be the most expensive one. That one's probably going to be, like, $2,400 or $2,500. They will not have an Eagle 5090? Oh, okay. So if they don't, then they don't. But then that means that their MSRP option is going to have to be like a Gigabyte OC or something like that. Isn't it just easier to look at the manufacturer's websites? You know what? You might actually have a point there. Gigabyte AORUS Master RTX 5090. You're right. I should have done that. There we go. Yeah, but see, the problem with these is they have all the Photoshop, like, renders and stuff. Like, this doesn't look real to me compared to looking at the product from the stage show. So, okay, so this one is the AORUS Master. This is the highest end one. This one will probably be close to $2,500. And it's the chunky... You can see that it is a quad slot because it has 3 fingers... And then the shroud extends past the third finger, which means this is a quad slot GPU, which means this is a chonky GPU that can probably handle the full TBP as advertised. So active cooling design, Hawk fan, premium thermal conductivity solution, so that you can see the vapor chamber right there. They got a really thick vapor chamber on there. Passive cooling module. What they mean by that is vapor chamber. That's just marketing speech. And then through line RGB design. They've got their new through line RGB design. I like that they have GeForce RTX on the side like that. I really want to see one of these actually illuminate the GeForce RTX logo. What I don't understand is why none of these AIBs, like these AIBs, they think people want to see the Aorus logo lit up, or they want to see like MSI's logo lit up, or they want to see the word Supreme, or they want to see like tough or something. Like, I'll be honest, I don't care about those. I want it to say GeForce RTX. I want to see GeForce RTX with the RGB lit up, either in white, like it's showing up here, or in like green or something. I want to see GeForce RTX. Give me GeForce RTX with the lights. I don't want to see Aorus with lights and no GeForce with lights. It's either, so like Gigabyte, this is a message to Gigabyte, MSI, ASUS, ZOTAC, whoever the rest of these people are that make these things. Give me an AIB that has GeForce RT. Is it so hard to ask? Is it so hard to make the word GeForce RTX light up with RGB? Like, yet somehow they can make Aorus light up with RGB, but they can't make GeForce light up? Can you do it the other way around? Or like, can you light up GeForce RTX and not Aorus? Or if you want to light up Aorus, then you need to light up both of them. Just saying. Light up both of them. Give us the best of both worlds. Give us Aorus with RGB and GeForce RTX. Why can't we have GeForce RTX and Aorus, or GeForce RTX MSI, GeForce RTX Supreme, GeForce RTX Strix? Why does it have to be Strix with lights, MSI with lights, Aorus with lights, but then GeForce RTX sits there with no lights? That's stupid. So, no, someone from NVIDIA didn't say that. The only thing the NVIDIA people said is that you have to display the brand. I'm pretty sure there's nothing from NVIDIA saying you cannot illuminate the... Why would they say that? That's stupid. That's dumb. They need to light up the GeForce RTX. See, like that is so dumb that they don't do that. I've said this before, like, the first AIB to illuminate the GeForce RTX is the one that I'll end up buying. It's that simple. I don't care about Aorus or Supreme or whatever the brand is. I don't care about those things having RGB. I want the GeForce RTX. And I want the Radeon logo. Give me Radeon with RGB or give me GeForce RTX with RGB. I don't want this. I don't care about these other like things like Aorus, MSI Supreme, Ventus, Strix, TUF, Prime, whatever ZOTAC's shoe brand is. Like, it's dumb. They need this to light up. Seriously. Like, apparently they don't understand how to market their product. They don't know how to sell the product properly. Oh, wow, look at this. You can stick a fan on it. Does this come with the GPU? Or is this like you can attach an actual 120mm fan to this? Wait a minute. So, they're essentially doing the Gigabyte thing, where Gigabyte gives you the option. Like, you want the fourth fan? You can put on a fourth fan. It's like, this makes me think of their X670E motherboards. You want Thunderbolt? You can add Thunderbolt to your AMD motherboard. Just buy our add-in card. You want USB 4? You can buy our add-in card and add Thunderbolt 4 or USB 4 to your AMD motherboard. That's how they were. So it's like, oh, you want the fourth fan? You can add the fourth fan. This is a very Gigabyte thing. Gigabyte gives you the option. It's all about options with Gigabyte. Whereas ASUS is like, hey, you want a fourth fan? Spend more money for the Astral. And you get the fourth fan included. And I guess this is a nicer look than, you know, having this rando fan just sitting on top of the GPU like that. I don't know how good that looks. Looks kind of practical, but okay. It looks impractical, but yeah, they let you do it. I mean, you can do fourth fan. You can put the fourth fan on there. Okay, so that is Gigabyte. It's funny how this thing, whatever this is, an evolution of 10. Maybe it's because I have the browser zoomed in for the chat to be able to see the screen. But that looks hilarious. It just doesn't look professional to me. This looks like, what? What? Anyway, whatever. So anyway, Gigabyte and ASUS are going with the Chongus. Did we look at MSI yet? Let's just look. Okay, MSI Supreme 5090. Here we go. There it is. Oh my. Wow. Okay, I want to say something about MSI. MSI is trying to go for that, like, ultra luxury car brand style look. Like, they're going for that Mercedes / Lexus / BMW. They're trying to sell you a luxury graphics card, dude. Like, what is this? Like, it's got a diamond shape. It's got, like, it's all geometric. They're doing like the glass angled, sharp angled background, like obsidian rocks, like obsidian crystals in the background. They're trying to sell you a luxury product with this. This is the coolest thing that I have seen. Props to MSI, because this is how you market your product. This comes across as cooler, more sophisticated, upscale. Oh, I said upscale. I said the U word. Uh-oh. Whereas this looks okay. Like, I'm a fan of the Aorus Master. Like, this thing does look good. But I mean, like, the website, like, this looks kind of cheesy. Not gonna lie, this looks kind of cheesy. This looks really, really cheesy right here. But, you know, they're trying to show you what it can do. You know, okay, it does like this. You got a little, it looks like you can upload a little GIF. They got a little Aorus the dragon, or Aorus the bird, or whatever in there. Like, you know, you got some little bird, some 8-bit sprite bird flying around on the screen right there on the Aorus Master. So this one looks cool. Meanwhile, you got MSI over here trying to sell you a luxury graphics card. You can tell these things are going to be expensive, man. This is like buying jewelry. This is like some super, like, look at this. Look at this. Look at how, let's just look at the gallery. Let's go to the gallery. Look at this. Oh, I can't let me zoom in. Let me zoom in. Okay, look at this. Look at how they did this. Okay, well, that doesn't do it justice. But see how it looks like they're going for this. They're going for the brushed aluminum finish. They got the brush, and then some of it's not. Like, see how they have the satin matte finish metal on this in the middle, and then they've got the brushed aluminum angularized in 2 different directions.
Can you run AB 580 on AI 58400 ASRock Z370 Extreme 4?
As long as the BIOS has the option to turn on resizable bar. If it can do resizable bar, then it will be fine. If it cannot do resizable bar, then the answer is no. Technically, you can run it, even if it doesn't have resizable bar, but you're losing like 50% of the performance. So it's not a good idea. It's a very, very bad idea, unless the BIOS supports resizable bar. Intel has a list, though. Like, they literally have a list, and the last I checked, anything older than Z590, maybe Z490, is not supported. AI or Al or AI subscribe to the channel. But yeah, I don't recommend it for that old of a motherboard unless the motherboard has that. Jimmy the Jew from Philly just subscribed. That's a very long YouTube channel name, but okay, thanks for the sub. Welcome to the channel. Okay, well, thanks for stopping by. But see, this thing looks... Okay, see, I don't... This annoys me. They went with a 2-finger instead of a 3-finger. If they're gonna do... This is obviously, this is like a 3.5 slot. So if you're gonna do something that's 3 slots or more, put the 3rd finger on there so that it's not so dependent on the anti-sag brace or anti-sag bracket or whatever, or the bridge or something. Because this is not... No. Seriously? This is like looking... Okay, it's like you're gonna go buy a Mercedes S-Class, and then you look under the car, and you see, like, the nasty tailpipes and stuff that doesn't even look good. Like, the exhaust looks all messy. This doesn't look good. Like, why don't they put the 3-finger there? Like, the 3rd finger needs to be there. Like, I don't need to see an engine block sticking, like, looking at me. You know what I'm saying? So, they need to cover that up. That's pretty standard. MSI is doing the colored thing on the cable, so you know that you plugged it in all the way. Meaning, if you see yellow, you haven't plugged it in all the way. And they even include... This is basically the anti-sag... what do they call this? The stand or something. So they include that as well. It looks like they have like what looks to be a little screen there. Or this thing illuminates. But yeah, it's like they're trying to sell a fancy piece of jewelry for like $2,500. So anyway. That's the 3rd finger. The stand. So the Supreme, I think this is going to be a popular one. It really depends on if you like this aesthetic. I think this look is cool. It looks very, like, sophisticated, but I don't know if this doesn't have the gamery look to me. They're going for, like, more of a... I don't know. It has, like, a good... Like, it has more, like, understated look, is what I'm saying. Like an industrial design. So, yeah, we'll see how what price this is. None of them are revealing prices. Nvidia revealed the price, but I feel like the AIBs have not announced pricing on any of these. But I think these are going to be very expensive. This is literally like a piece of jewelry, the way they're presenting it with the marketing. So, okay, well, those are the major ones that were shown off at CES. MSI had like Ventus and those other ones that are like lower end, closer to MSRP. Look up the Vanguard. Vanguard. Okay, this one has the gamer look. This one looks like a StarCraft 4 battlecruiser or something. Like, this looks like something that's flying in outer space. Literally the Vanguard. It's basically a starship carrier. You know what I'm saying? Like, this looks like it could do battle with the Star Destroyers from Star Wars or something. So that's what it looks like. It looks like something that's meant to be in outer space. Hence, they've got like all this like star constellations and planetary bodies or whatever these things in the sky are supposed to be. Hence, it's the Vanguard. Look at that. Look at that. They're going for the space theme. I was right. I said it looked like a battle cruiser. You see some guy stranded on a planet. You see an astronaut on a planet. This looks like it's a scene out of Starfield. Just saying. It looks like a scene out of Starfield. Then you got this thing hovering in the air. It makes me think of the cutscene in StarCraft Brood War, where the Marines are fighting the Zerg, and the the battle cruiser literally like leaves them to die, and it take us into orbit. I've seen enough, you know, like that scene. You guys know what I'm talking about? All those StarCraft players back there. Like, this is the Vanguard. This is like a throwback to all you RTS people. Okay, Vanguard looks cool. I mean, yeah, this one looks cool. This one will probably be like $2,200 if I had to guess. $2,300 for the Vanguard. It's another Chongus. You can tell. You know how you can tell? It's a Chongus. Look at that. The third finger goes like right here. And it extends past the third finger. This is literally another 3.5 to 4 slot card. Vanguard has more RGB. Yeah, is this supposed to be like their new... This is a new brand. I've never heard of Vanguard before. They're doing the flow-through. Everybody's doing the flow-through. It looks like they're doing the same... Okay, they got that thing. This literally looks like a battle cruiser from StarCraft. Okay, that looks cool. This one looks like it would look good if it's vertical mount. This one looks like a good vertical mounted card. It looks bigger than the Supreme. I think it's just because of the way the shroud is shaped. This one is more square. The Supreme is more like angular. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. This one has dual BIOS. I think Supreme has dual BIOS too, though. This is a tier lower than Supreme. Yeah, it looks like it is lower tier. Like, if I had to guess, like, if someone did a blind test, they just showed me the GPUs, they didn't tell me the names of the GPUs, I would guess that the Supreme costs more than this. By, like, $100 or $50 or something. But it doesn't look to be way more than this. Yeah, man, see, the AIBs are going all out on these designs. I feel like they're going all out, and it's probably because NVIDIA's given them an opportunity here, because I feel like this thing is going to underperform. At least for the 5090s. For the 5080s, it's a completely different story. Like, if I'm going to get the 5080, this is what I'll buy. Like, I will buy the Founders Edition 5080 if I was going to get a 5080. Now, if I'm going to get a 5090, I don't know if I would actually get this. I have a feeling this is going to be like one of the worst 5090s because it's too small for that much power. I would feel more confident using some Chongus GPU just because I've tested so many high-power GPUs in the last couple of years, so I know exactly what makes a GPU quiet versus what makes a GPU loud. What's my top 3? Let's actually look at the official price, or let's look at the not price. Let's look at the ASUS Astral 5090. Let's look at that one on their actual website. Okay, so here, whoa, okay, they got some fancy marketing going on here. It's doing the spin. Okay, so this is the Astral with advanced AI. ASUS is saying that the perfect power supply companion is the ROG Thor 3 1600 watt or 1200 watt power supply. And I would say if I was going to build a computer with the Astral, I would go at minimum with a 1200 watt power supply. I would not use anything less than 1200 watts for any 5090. Any of them. It doesn't even matter if it's the lowest end Ventus or Founders Edition to the highest end Astral, AORUS Master, or Supreme. Minimum power supply for this type of GPU, 1200 watts. That's another thing that I forgot to put in the eligibility. Yeah, I would add that to the eligibility. If you don't have at minimum a 1200 watt power supply, you're not eligible for one of these cards. It's that simple. And the reason why is because if you don't have a 12, like, okay, for PCIe 5.0, ATX 3.0, and ATX 3.1.
Check out the 5090 TUF.
Okay, yeah, we'll look at that one. We'll look at the Strix as well. We'll look at the Strix and the TUF, and also probably the Prime, because the Prime is probably the closest to MSRP. assuming they have a Prime version of this. But the reason why I would say 1200 watt minimum is because the PCIe 5.0 ATX 3.0 spec mandates that for the special power connector that the NVIDIA GPUs use, it will only allow the sense wires will detect if the power supply is 1100 watts or more. If the power supply cannot handle, if it's not rated for 1100 watts or more, it will limit the performance of the graphics card. This is a known fact. I did a video on this, it was either last year or the year before. It might have actually been 2023, but we covered this in depth when we were investigating the melting connectors. And at the time in the video, I showed a chart, the official PCIe power spec chart, and from that chart, it literally shows that if you want the GPU to have full potential, you must have at minimum an 1100 watt power supply. Now, in reality, to my knowledge, there are like almost no 1100 watt power supplies. There are 1000 watt power supplies, and then it steps up immediately to 1200 watt. So that is the reason why the minimum spec power supply for this tier of graphics card should be 1200 watt minimum. Hence the reason why ASUS is literally saying perfect PSU companion, either Thor 1600 watt or 1200 watt. There is a reason why they're doing this. We have a video detailing that on this channel. Is the 1500 watt enough? Yeah, of course. It's above 1100. It's 1100 or greater. Anything less is not good enough. And well, okay, technically it can run on lower than 1100. It just will not run at full boost algorithm. The GPU will limit itself in the firmware, in the VBIOS. It will not run at full performance if it is on anything less than an 1100 watt. 1000 watt is not going to, no. 1000 watt will not give it the full potential. It will limit itself because that's not a high enough spec for the ATX. Go watch the video. We covered that in depth, like I think in 2023. So no, 1000 watt is not enough. This is the reason why, guys, if you watched my PC live stream build videos, if you notice in every single one of those videos, in those live stream builds, I was always using either 1200 watts or more. Hence why all those builds feature typically a 1200 watt or a 1300 watt. There was one build that we did that was like a lower, it was like a mid-tier build with an 8700G. That one was on an 850 watt power supply. That's because I never intend to run this type of graphics card in that PC. So you have to have minimum of 1100 watts if you want the full performance. Otherwise, you will artificially limit yourself if you do not have the correct power supply. This is well understood. This is well documented. There's a lot of articles out there besides my one video on this topic. Igor's lab has covered it in depth. Hardware Busters has done like numerous videos on this subject concerning power supplies. So yeah, you got to have 1100 watt minimum. Why does NVIDIA recommend 1000? Because they understand that the vast majority of people out there don't have ATX 3.0 power supplies and are just ignorant to the fact of how ATX 3.0 works. So they're just going to put 1000, blanket statement it, and let that be the minimum. The reality is if you're running a 1000 watt power supply, your GPU will artificially limit the power draw to like 450 watts. You got to go look at the video. The video covers it. It's based off of the sense wires. It's based off of the power supply. Now, if the power supply cannot communicate over the sense wires because it's like an ATX 2.0 power supply. So let's put it this way. If you have an old power supply, if your power supply is like 5 years old, 10 years old, even like 3 years old, or it's just a power supply that does not have ATX 3.0 compatibility, you can still use this, but the GPU will limit its power draw because it cannot communicate. Like if it's getting no info from the power supply, it's gonna limit what it can do. It's the reason why is because it's a safety adapter. It's not adapter. It's a safety feature. It's a safety feature. They don't want this to, like, think about it like this. If this thing has no visibility, with no communication, with how much power can be supplied to it, what do you think it's gonna do? You think it's gonna, like, draw whatever it wants and start a fire, or, like, burn itself out? No. That's not how it works. So you basically, you either have to have a 1200 watt ATX 3.0 or 3.1, or you have to have an older power supply that has either the adapter cable, or you have to use the included adapter from nvidia. Yeah, I don't know how safe that would be long term. I've heard a lot of, like, people that do crypto. Well, okay, people that do crypto would not run it at that kind of power limit, but I don't think that's safe. Personally, I would not do that. We've done a video on the current draw per pin. I've done the mathematical calculations for that. So 666 watts over that connector is not a good idea. Now, you say firm arc, so you're testing stability or something. Personally, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. Considering all the problems that connector has, I would definitely not run it at more than 600 watts. Okay, yeah, the concern is not the GPU. The concern is actually the power connector. Okay, so that covers this one. Let's look at the, I think, so personally, guys, out of all of these, so far, I think the Astral's my favorite one. I think this one is the coolest looking one. And the main reason why I like this one is because this one reminds me of the Radeon RX 6900 XT. It also, the RGB strip that they have on there looks a lot like the Sapphire Nitro Plus, the 7900 XTX. So this one actually looks kind of like a 7900 XTX in some aspects. So, okay, so let's look at the... we're going to look at the TUF, let's look at the Strix, and then the TUF. So we're going down the stack. So ASUS, do they have a product page for the Strix? Hold on, do they have an actual product page? Is it Astral? I guess they don't. You try Googling it? Okay, ASUS ROG Strix 5090. They only have the introductory article. They don't actually have... So, hold on. Do they have TUF? ASUS TUF RTX 5090. Okay, so they have the TUF because that's under the ASUS brand. So we can look at this one. Okay. I do think the Strix looks pretty good too, though. So the TUF... This one is probably going to be $2,100. I don't think this one will be that much over MSRP, but I think it is going to be a little bit over MSRP. It's either going to be like $50 to $100 more. So 2050 or 2100 is what my estimate is for the price of the TUF. So built to last, the RTX 5090 TUF. They don't actually have a gallery on here, do they? They don't have a gallery. Oh, wait, do they? Yeah, right here. Okay, so this one, I personally am not a huge fan of the TUF. Like, why does the picture not change? The website? Okay, there it goes. Kind of slow. Are some of these images just not loading? So I'm not a huge fan of the TUF design. But the thing is, like, if you want to save money and if you don't want to buy, like, if you don't want to pay like $500 over MSRP, then this is probably a good choice. But I think the FE is going to be loud. I don't think it's going to be quiet. Unless it's severely underpowered. Like it's severely power limited. Like it doesn't pull more than like 400 watts max. Then it'll be usable. But that thing is too small. I don't know why these images aren't loading properly. Like it's... I click on them and it's like most of them don't even load. Yeah, okay, so some of the images aren't loading. Like only the first one... This one and the last one load. I don't know why it's not loading for me. But it comes with this. So it comes with the TUF branding sticker. It comes with the anti-sag stand here. And it comes with the adapter, the 4-pin adapter. Or like, not 4-pin, but you get what I'm saying. It's got the 4 8-pin adapter to the 12 by 6 volt, 12 volt by 6 or whatever, 2x12 6, whatever it is, the newer 12 volt high power cable. It's got the newer one. So that's that. Interestingly enough, when nvidia was asked if they updated the pins or anything, the guy from nvidia said no. It's basically the same one that's on the 4090, which is an interesting answer. So they really just kind of like did the one change to the 12 by 6 and that's all they did, and that's basically it. So, okay, so yeah, their website's broken. Okay, but let's see. Does it tell us the actual speed? Like in megahertz, gigahertz? AI performance TBD, engine clock TBD. CUDA cores, it just tells the CUDA cores and the memory speed. It doesn't tell us anything about the actual engine speed. So, okay. And they're doing that because they're competing directly with NVIDIA, and they want to try to differentiate themselves from NVIDIA, so they'll wait for the last minute. But you can tell this is a very long card, and it's another chunky card, but it's not going to be an insane upcharge over the, or a huge markup over the MSRP. $4K here and there on 5080. Yeah, 5080 will handle 4K. Similar to how the 4090 handles 4K. So, okay, so that kind of covers the majority of the AIBs that were at CES and have product pages. So, for some reason, ROG Strix doesn't have a website. Like, if I do ROG ASUS Strix RTX 5090. Yeah, they don't have a website for that. All they have is this introductory page. But I do think the Strix looks pretty good, too. The Strix looks kind of plasticky, though. The TUF looks tough. The Prime looks... Okay, the Prime is the MSRP. Prime is the MSRP, unless this is not 5090. Oh, okay, so this one will... So it looks like the Prime is only going to be available for the 5080, the 5070 Ti, and the 5070. So there will be no 5090 Prime. Well, that's a shame, because that means that ASUS is not... ASUS will probably not offer an MSRP priced 5090 then. Meaning all the ASUS ones will be more expensive than MSRP. Starting with the TUF. I don't think so, Gilgamesh. I think those are fixed. Those are fully closed systems. They're not designed for you to add liquid. And you wouldn't really want to open them up either, because they're basically sealed from the factory, and it's not just water that's in there. They actually have it's a kind of mixture. I forgot what the ratio was, but there is some form of of kind of like antifreeze. It's not exactly antifreeze, but it's similar in the sense that they have a anti-corrosion, anti-organic liquid mixed with the water so that it doesn't build up algae or organic matter inside the radiator. Glycol, thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for. Yeah, it's got glycol in it, so right, it's a mix. It's not just water. I think a lot of people don't understand or don't know that AIOs don't just have plain water in them. They've got the glycol mixture mixed in with the water. So you do not want to open this. You do not want to mess with it, because if you open it up, first of all, that opens the path for organic matter to get into the loop. So now you've basically contaminated the loop. And then if you start adding water to it, you're going to throw off the ratio. So you do not want to mess with the AIO. The AIOs are designed to stay fully sealed for the entire duration of their lifespan. And they last for around 5 years. After 5 years, you probably want to replace the AIO because it won't be as efficient as it was when it was new. Because over time, over the years, some of the air will permeate through because the tubes have a very small degree of porosity. So they do slowly lose the liquid over time. But it is over a long period of time. And the thing with this mixture, the glycol water mix, it changes the boiling point of the water, just like how antifreeze works in a car's cooling system. Because that way, what it does is it modifies the freezing temperature and the boiling temperature. And by doing that, it also impacts the ability for like organic things to survive in the liquid. So that's how those work. So anyway, I do like the look of... So if I had to rank the ASUS cards, I would say the Astral's my favorite. This one is my favorite one. Number 2 is... I actually kind of think the Prime looks good, so I'm a little bit disappointed that the Prime is not available for the 5090, because this one would be a nice, like, MSRP 5090. So I'm a little bit kind of let down that that's not available. The TUF looks fine. The TUF has that for some reason, like, I think what ASUS is trying to go for with the TUF is like that, like, industrial, kind of like, I don't know, I think of like a construction site. I think of like a skyscraper that's being built. It has that kind of look to it. You know what I mean? Like, okay, look at it from... Where's that one picture that I saw earlier? Is it this one? Yeah, so this one. So, like, from this, when I see this angle of the TUF, I imagine a building that is under construction. Or I imagine a parking garage. Like, these diagonal lines, they literally look like it's a building. Like, I imagine, like, cars are parked up here, and you've got, like, multiple different levels, or it's a parking garage, or it's like a building that's being constructed. It's tough. It's like the shell. It's the foundational structure of the building that's being built. That's what this looks like to me. So I'm not a super huge fan of the TUF, but it looks okay. I mean, I don't think it's better looking than the Astral, but I'm biased. I think the Astral is the best looking one, personally. I mean, it doesn't help me that this is the most expensive one. And then the Strix is okay, but the thing with the Strix has that very gamer look. And I'm not a huge fan of the gamer look. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's all blinged out with RGB. You got RGB here. You got the ROG logo in the middle. You got all this stuff. The GeForce RTX logo's there, but it doesn't light up. So that's a huge letdown. That's a missed opportunity. So it's got this two-toned, like, yin-yang look where it's like it's got the gray white on this end. It's got the black with the RGB on the other end. So it's not my style. It's okay, but it's too gamery looking. It doesn't look sophisticated. It doesn't look upscale. I said the U word again. I said upscale again. I told myself I shouldn't be saying that word, but it doesn't look upscale. It's just kind of like all over the place. So if you like that style, if you like the RGB bling, you like the gamer look, I know it's a preference. Like, I'm not a huge fan of it. I think the Astral looks more cleaner design. It looks better, in my opinion. But I kind of like that silver metal on black color scheme. I was a huge fan of the Radeon. So you guys remember the RX 6900 XT. This is still probably one of my favorite reference card designs. This is my favorite AMD reference design. This is the coolest looking reference design from AMD. It's got that silver, it's got chrome, and it's got the black. It looks good. I get the vibes of this when I look at the Astral. The Astral definitely looks more chongus. It's more squared off. It's more rectangular. Whereas the Radeon RDNA 2 flagship was definitely more angled in the middle, especially. But I kind of like that style. I was a huge fan of that style. So that's why I like the Astral the most. MSI Ventus is very plastic. You know what I'm saying? It just looks cheap. And I know MSI Ventus will be MSRP, but it's like, I don't know, man. It doesn't look like right. Are you sure? I don't think so. I don't think it looks like that. MSI RTX 5080 Ventus. Is there even a 5090 Ventus? This kind of... I can see what you mean. I would say this looks more like 20 series. This looks more like 20 series if it had a triple fan. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I can kind of see the resemblance. So I get where you're coming from. Like, it looks... I can kind of see... Yeah. With the silver, I can kind of see the resemblance. But to me... This... Yeah, it kind of looks like it. The fans look similar. I think the Radeon fans look cooler because they got that chrome silver on the blades. These are just plain black fans. But yeah. This looks kind of like a 20 series. This looks like a 2080 Ti if it had 3 fans. Although the 20 series had those fans that had way too many fan blades on them. So it looks kind of like this to me. You know what I'm saying? It's got the color. It's got the 20 series style. Except the 20 series was a twin fan. So that's what that looks like to me. PNY 59. Oh, I didn't even think of that. PNY RTX 5090. Oh, you know what? This one... Hold on. That's 5070? Why do they look... How come when I click on this, all it does is go here? Like, it doesn't actually show all of... Okay, so they've just got... Yeah, this does look kind of like the Radeon RDNA 2. They got that same, like, X pattern in the middle. Yeah, these look cool. PNY is also pretty good. I didn't even know that they showed theirs off. Okay, that's cool. I didn't even know. I wasn't even aware that PNY had theirs already revealed. PNY is actually really good. The ZOTAC? Okay, if we're going to look at PNY, we got to look at the ZOTAC. Whoa. Oh, they're going with the sneakers. They still got their sneakers style. To gaming and beyond, ZOTAC. They're going with gold. They're going with the golden style. They're trying to sell you a BMW. Like this. Look at that. Man, that does actually look pretty good. Wow. Hold up. ZOTAC looks this good. Okay, that doesn't look that great, but how come they've got like... This one on the left looks good, actually. Man, ZOTAC is good. So my preferred AIBs for NVIDIA cards, and this probably doesn't hold a lot of weight considering I typically only buy the Founders Edition cards, but if I was gonna go with AIB, this doesn't really apply to 50 series yet because I haven't really looked thoroughly at ZOTAC and PNY, but I've been saying this for years. Previously, if I was not going to get a Founders Edition, I would get either PNY or ZOTAC. Those are my top two choices for NVIDIA. Then after that, traditionally, it used to be MSI, but it's kind of moved away from MSI recently, but probably MSI, maybe ASUS. So far, out of all of them, though, I think my favorite looking one out of all of them that I've looked at is the ASUS Astral. I think this one's my favorite one. Even after looking at PNY and ZOTAC, I still kind of think the ASUS one is my favorite. I would have to see some alternative pictures to the ZOTAC because I feel like these pictures are not good representations of the ZOTAC. Like the one on the left looks good. The Ultimate ZOTAC looks good. Okay, here we go. Okay, they've got Amp Extreme, so they're still going with their Amp branding. Amp Extreme Infinity, Solid OC, Solid. Okay. Then they've got the 5080s. So let me see. Let's go look at this Infinity. ZOTAC, Gaming, GeForce. See, when they have that light bar like that, I feel like that kind of ruins the marketing of it. I mean, yeah, they're trying to show that, hey, it's an RGB strip. But again, they're not illuminating the GeForce. But where ZOTAC does the right thing, they actually put triple fingers. They actually went for the 3 fingers. So this is correct. This is the proper thing to do for a Chongus GPU. You put the 3rd finger. Why? Because the 3rd finger prevents sag. It helps prevent sag. If you run a 2-finger graphics card, you have to use the anti-sag bracket. Otherwise, you will have GPU sag after like 6 months. It'll start sagging because it's too heavy. It's called gravity. It's called the laws of physics. They're going with the flow through. They got a whole lot of RGB. You know what this one makes me think of, though? This is giving me like Red Devil vibes without the Red Devil branding. I feel like this card would look so much better in person. And that's how it's always been with ZOTAC's cards. Like, in pictures, the pictures never seem to do ZOTAC cards justice. Like, in person, these cards look so much nicer than they do in these pictures. So, anyway, it comes with some... Okay, they're doing... What is this? Why is there... What is that? There's like a... Oh, that's an RGB cable. So they come with an RGB cable. It includes an RGB cable. That's nice. It includes some... Well, it looks like some kind of Yu-Gi-Oh card. And then it has a... some kind of... I don't know why they're going with the brace thing. I really think, like, ASUS and MSI are doing the anti-sag better than this. Like, these things are kind of a hassle to install, depending on the case. So I don't like this included thing. That's a huge letdown. It depends on how easy it is to install. But, like, that doesn't look... I don't like this... whatever. I could be wrong. The instructions are there, so it's kind of interesting. But, yeah. So that's ZOTAC. Yeah, FE models I feel like are going to be very potentially high maintenance if they break down. That's the thing about the FE, man. I really don't think this is a good idea to get an FE this time around. Especially if you're doing 5090. I feel like if you're going for a 5080, the 5080 with the Founders Edition is okay. Because that's 360 watts. But like $2,000 for something with multiple points of failure does not sound, on a 2 slot, that does not sound good. With that kind of power consumption, that looks like a no-go. Alright, so we covered the NVIDIA cards. We talked about the fact that the 5070 is not as fast as a 4090, at least not naturally. So those are the main things I want to talk about when it comes to 50 series. No, it would be a TI. It would be a TI, not a Super. Okay, so let's talk about AMD's cards real quick. How much time have we spent on NVIDIA? Oh, we've talked for over 2 hours about NVIDIA's cards. Okay, let's talk about the AMD Radeon. So AMD Radeon RX 9070, they will debut in late January. The review samples have shipped out. So I don't know. So AMD had like 45 minutes and they really wanted to focus on their strengths. Because here's the thing. If you have 45 minutes and if you have all these CPU products to talk about, like Strix Halo, and you know these things obliterate your competitor, or your competitor literally has no answer to a certain product, you have to talk about that product. So I understand why they didn't talk about Radeon. Meanwhile, they already know NVIDIA is going to have products that AMD doesn't compete with this generation, like 5090, for example. So it made sense that they just quickly briefed the press on this and then just didn't talk about it. But I feel like they're going to talk about this very soon, especially if these rumors about review samples being shipped out are true. So, and I've also heard that these cards will be available like around end of the month or early February. So it's not like they're going to be that much longer to wait compared to the NVIDIA cards. In fact, this card, the 9070, will probably launch before the 5070. Because the 5070 comes like later in February. So, okay, so probably the most interesting thing about this whole thing is the fact that it's literally called the 9070. They actually went, because I remember we had all these leaks about 9070, 9060, 9070 XT, all that stuff. So AMD, like, no one expected them to do this, and then they literally went and did it anyway. So all the rumors were true. It turns out this is legitimately called the RX 9070 and the RX 9070 XT. So what they're doing, and I guess it's a good thing that they're doing this. I don't know if they're going to stick to this naming convention. I wouldn't be surprised if they change the naming convention again. But 9070 is supposed to make it so that, like, if somebody is comparing, like, let's say somebody only has ever used a GeForce graphics card and they are fed up with NVIDIA for whatever reason. They don't want to pay the NVIDIA tax. And on top of that, they don't want to pay the ASUS tax on top of the NVIDIA tax. So they're just fed up in general. And they don't know that there's other brands of NVIDIA cards that are cheaper than ASUS because they only know about ASUS and they only know about GeForce. So they're completely ignorant to the real world. So what they want to do is they want to buy an alternative, but they don't know how to, like, look at an alternative and see if that is an equivalent to what they're already familiar with. So that is why AMD is going with this branding change to the 9070, because they want to make it easy. So it's like, oh, you are looking at a 5070. Well, we have this 9070. Or you're looking at a 5070 Ti. Well, we have a 9070 XT. So it's like the opposite of the Ti. So whereas NVIDIA has a Ti, we have an XT. That is what AMD is trying to do. So that's the goal of changing the name with this new generation of GPUs. Now, I think, personally, I think that these GPUs are going to be very interesting compared to what we got from AMD last time. Because these GPUs, and we don't really know that much about them, but these new 9000 cards will be the first AMD graphics cards to feature true dedicated silicon that does the upscaling in an ML framework. So what that means, for those that don't know what I just said, if you know what DLSS is and you understand how it works and how it's different from the way FSR works, the new graphics cards, so like the 9070, will literally do the same sort of upscaling that you get with DLSS, which means it will use a machine learning based algorithm that runs, that's trained to do the upscaling, just like on the NVIDIA cards, which means AMD, for the first time in the history of Radeon, AMD GPUs will be at feature parity with NVIDIA GPUs when it comes to traditional upscaling technology. So with FSR 4, they're going to now match DLSS from the way that upscaling is handled. So, hence the reason why NVIDIA has had to, like I said before, we said this last time with the 40 series launch, what does NVIDIA do when the competition is equal to them in terms of the standard, in terms of the performance, the functionality, etc.? They change the rules of the game. If they can't win outright, they change the rules of the game. So what are they doing this time? Multi-frame generation. So it's like, oh, you guys caught up to us with upscaling? Well, can you do 4 times the frame gen? We got 4 times the frame gen. So now that's the new gimmick. That's the new like objective that AMD is now going to chase in terms of what do we do next? So the next thing they're going to do is multi-frame generation. So it's like the next goal now for AMD. I'm pretty sure the next goal is multi-frame generation. They're just going to copy NVIDIA and do multi-frame generation on the next iteration. So we've got dedicated hardware upscaling. They have the whole like Tensor Core stuff now. So basically it's the same sort of solution that what the 40 series offers in terms of upscaler, in terms of frame gen, from a traditional standpoint. So it's basically the same. So if you're buying, it doesn't really matter now if you're buying GeForce or Radeon, they both have the exact same style.
It is not like we have a choice. I will just get whatever is available on day one. If I can choose, I will buy the Astral.
Oh, so the Astral's your favorite? So is that the one that you like the most out of all the ones that we looked at? That's my favorite too. But I kind of already said that earlier. I kind of gave that away. But there are lots of choices though. You know, like ZOTAC looked like it was pretty good, although I need to do a little bit more research on ZOTAC. The PNY ones looked kind of bland to me, if I'm being honest. They're okay. I know that those will be the Best Buy ones. Like, you can get well, okay, I know you're not based in the US, but I'm just thinking, like, for me, like, if I'm just trying to think, like, what I would do. Like, if I'm going to get 5090, really, it's either, well, see, I don't know, because if Astral is stupidly expensive, I don't think I'm going to buy the Astral. If it's, like, way too expensive over MSRP, I just won't buy it on principle. So I don't know, man. It's like you said, you have a point though. It's not like we have a choice. Yeah, there's a bunch of different models to choose from, but the reality is you're going to be competing with scalpers and people who want these cards for AI. I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised at all if it's $2,500. Because that literally means that the Astral fulfilled my prophecy when I said that it would be $2,500. Like, remember, guys, I said 5090 in general, I said would be $2,500. So if Astral, my favorite one, ends up being $2,500, I'll be like, man, I knew I should not have said that. I should not have said that. But that's probably what it'll be. I wouldn't be surprised. Like I said, it depends on the monitor. It depends on the monitor resolution. Yeah, PNYs are going to be good, but I haven't done a lot of research into them. But anyway, so we were talking about 9070. So I think that this has the potential to be an interesting option for a lot of people. And I think this will finally put an end to the DLSS versus FSR comparisons, because they keep on, like, I said this like 2 years ago. I said eventually what's going to happen is AMD is going to catch up to NVIDIA when it comes to upscaling and whatever the feature set is that NVIDIA offers. And then at that point, they're just going to be competing on price. And NVIDIA doesn't like to do that. NVIDIA doesn't like to compete on price, because anytime you're competing on price, and that's literally the only differentiating factor, that's just a race to the bottom. And that's not how you build up the value of your brand. That's not how you build up the value of your, like, that's not how you differentiate yourself from your competitor, except price. So that's why they don't compete on price. NVIDIA has said that they don't compete on price, they compete on features. And so far they've continued to stay far ahead of everyone else. And AMD is kind of like the second to NVIDIA, and it's always been that way. And now AMD finally caught up to DLSS from an upscaling standpoint. So NVIDIA's like, okay, we got to change the rules again. So now we're going to do multi-frame gen. So now they're going to focus on frame gen. They're basically moving the goalposts. So now AMD is going to have to chase after multi-frame gen. So, and then NVIDIA's going to have to circle back and do something else. And then AMD, once they get multi-frame gen, then they got to go and follow them on this. So it's basically NVIDIA is leading and AMD is following in the GPU space. And that's why it's a completely different dynamic compared to the CPU world, where Intel was far ahead of AMD once upon a time, and then AMD caught up with them, and then AMD overtook them, and then Intel tried to like take back the crown by going like nuclear power plant consumption, and it was like they were competitive. But now they're just not competitive. So it's kind of like Goku fighting Boo, and then he like ran out of power, and then like Vegeta had to fight for him because he lost all his power. He had to power up, had to recharge. Intel's basically having to recharge right now because they're like out of power. So yeah, so the CPU market, it's utter domination. Like AMD is completely like dominating in CPU in every single vertical. Like from a technology standpoint, from a pure merit product showcasing, AMD is objectively better than Intel in literally every category. They're better in servers, they're better in mobile, they're better in gaming, they're better in multi-threading. Like they're better in energy efficiency. They literally beat Intel in every single metric that you can objectively measure. So that is how much they're dominating in the CPU space. Meanwhile, in the GPU space, Intel's a distant third, because, you know, B580, it's a good GPU, $250, it's a great value, 12 gigabytes, but, you know, like, it's an entry-level GPU. Let's be honest, it's an entry-level GPU. They have no mid-range offering, like nothing that can compete with a 5070. They have nothing that can compete with anything above that. And AMD can basically compete with NVIDIA all the way up the stack, except to the final tier. That's where they fall short. And as long as NVIDIA remains uncontested up at the top, they'll continue to drive they'll continue to lead the industry in whatever direction they want, because they don't have a rival across the entire platform. Now, but AMD, like for reference, NVIDIA does compete with AMD in a lot of different areas. Like in the data center world, it's different. However, even in the data center, even in the AI space, if you guys tuned into the keynote live stream that we did on Monday, NVIDIA proved that they are so far ahead in software development in like the AI research, in all this stuff, the whole ecosystem, everything, that is a completely different mountain for AMD to try to climb compared to the CPU mountain that they scaled, and then like they took over the peak and they're king of the hill in the CPU space. But, you know, like, man, the GPU world, that's a completely different animal. The competitor built fortresses and fortresses on all those mountaintops. It's a whole ecosystem. Yeah. So it's like Intel, it's like, okay, you're literally just surrounding them in a battle, and you're basically overthrowing them. Nvidia, you're literally having to scale Mount Everest, and you're having to like take over all these forts. There's all these forts that are set up. You got Fort Kuda. You got Fort Kudin. You got Fort GeForce. You got Fort, you know what I'm saying? Like, they got all these different things. So it's completely different. It is a completely different battle. Completely different dynamic. So not as cut and dry. But it's funny because AMD ended up winning the CPU war. Like, basically the way I see it, we alluded to this last week, like last episode of Tech Thursdays. There's a war happening in the CPU world, but the war is actually x86 versus ARM. Like, that is the actual meta war that's being waged as of last summer. Prior to that, there was a civil war in the x86 space, AMD versus Intel, and that war has gone on for decades. Now, I would say like AMD basically won. However, Intel's not completely gone. Intel is still there. Intel still has their land. Intel still has their products. They still got their fabs. So it's like they lost the war, but you know, they're still doing business. They're still kind of like autonomous. And then they're like, "Oh, let's form an alliance. Let's form an alliance." Remember, like AMD and Intel, like they basically teamed up because the new big enemy is ARM. So that's what we'll see play out in the next couple of years. x86 is going to have to fight for its survival. x86 today has the ecosystem. x86 has the advantage from a Windows operating standpoint, at least for native applications. They have a lot of like enterprise cloud operations that are still very heavily dependent on x86 in traditional data centers, in traditional server infrastructures. So they have that advantage. That's basically similar to the advantage that nvidia has in the AI software space. So as long as AMD and Intel can manage to maintain that software ecosystem for x86 native apps, they can hold on to their relevance against the oppression of ARM, because that oppression is going to get stronger and stronger. And Microsoft has already been corrupted. So you already know Microsoft has already turned to the dark side. They're already on the side of Qualcomm. They've joined the forces with ARM. So like Microsoft, Nvidia, and what you'll see in the next few years is it'll look like Microsoft is playing favorites. It will look completely unfair. It'll literally look like the downfall of x86 will go down in the history books because Microsoft wanted it to happen. That's what will happen. A lot of games are not compatible at the moment. Keyword, at the moment. So we'll see. What we'll see over the next couple of years is there's going to be a huge shift in software development, because ARM mobile benefits from ARM so much, and mobile is a heavy driving factor. And Microsoft wants to be more competitive with Apple because Microsoft can't scale their infrastructure in the same way that Apple and even to an extent Android has been able to on mobile. So that's been a huge problem for them. And hence now why they've partnered with Qualcomm to develop the like ARM-based version of Windows. That's basically step one. That is basically think of it like, let's put things another way for those that still don't understand this. If you've ever seen the movie Revenge of the Sith, Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, the Star Wars movie that came out in 2005, probably one of the most memorable Star Wars films out of the prequels, was probably the best one. It was basically the origin story of Darth Vader. It's how Anakin turned to the dark side. So think of it like this. Palpatine is basically ARM, and Anakin, the chosen one, is basically Microsoft. And Microsoft gets turned to the dark side. He gets corrupted. And that's the downfall of the Jedi. And the Jedi, in this sense, are metaphorically x86. So Mace Windu is AMD and or Intel, depending on how you look at it, and it's like Yoda is AMD or Intel or something. So basically, that's what it is. That's what it is. The fall of x86 is upon us. It has already started. Microsoft has already been corrupted. You will only see the corruption grow. I'm not saying corruption as in like a monetary scandal or anything. No, I'm just saying from a symbolic sense, Microsoft has already turned to the dark side. They're already favoring the ARM architecture. They want ARM to succeed. They want ARM to take over Windows. They want it to go full native ARM. They want to do what they call the crossing of the chasm, just like Apple did all those years ago. So this benefits them in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways that we're not going to get into on this stream because it's way out off topic in terms of what we're supposed to be talking about, which is CES. But we'll discuss that later. You'll see that play out over the next couple of years. So it is it is going to be basically Intel and AMD and a bunch of enterprise companies that don't want to spend the money to like have their either retrain their programming staff or the developers or have to contract it out to rewrite all the apps for ARM native. It's like, you'll see it. There'll be a lot of pushback. It's basically the Clone Wars, guys. It's the Clone Wars. The Jedi are x86. The Sith and the Empire is basically ARM. And you know what side NVIDIA's on? NVIDIA is on the side of Emperor Palpatine. Like, NVIDIA and Qualcomm are the Galactic Empire, and the rebels are AMD and Intel. And you will see AMD and Intel will become more like similar to each other, even though they're technically competitors. You will see AMD basically won the war between the two of them, and now Intel and AMD have to kind of like, you know, put aside their differences and work together. It's going to be really weird. It's going to be a very interesting turn of events that we'll see play out over the next 5 to 10 years. Okay, so we talked about... Did we talk enough about this? So AMD, let's look at some of this stuff. So they did show some AMD cards. I don't know what this card is. If this is the reference AMD card, I mean, I guess that's okay looking. The only ones that were shown off were the PowerColor ones. In fact, I thought I had... Okay, here we go. So PowerColor showed off 3 at CES. They're really going for like this Halloween demonic... I don't know what the word is. Like they've got the Red Devil. That's the flagship. Then they've got the Hellhound. And now they've got the Reaper. It's the Red Devil, the Hellhound, and the Reaper. Man, somebody at PowerColor has an obsession with, like, death. And I don't know, man. like, I guess it's cool for some people. I mean, it's not really my thing. Like, Red Devil, Hellhound, Reaper. It's like, okay. It's unique. No one else is really doing it, but that's what they're going for. So it's like the Hellhound. The Hellhound has been a really good choice for the previous generation, for the 7000 series. So they're doing that flow-through design again. And then they have the Red Devil, which is their flagship historically. This one does look similar to the 7000 series, but I can see the differences that they made. First of all, the PowerColor logo, it looks like they changed their logo. And they're going for that demonic Diablo look there, and it looks like they have like a partial flow through, but then somehow like some of it is covered up by the devil itself. So dual BIOS on this card. You also get LED switches on there to control the RGB. So it's nice that it's dual BIOS. That's number one. I like that about it. Triple 8-pin. So they're not going with the NVIDIA power connector. They're still sticking with the traditional 8-pin. And it's triple 8-pin. Which tells me that means that similar to the NVIDIA cards, I have a feeling that the AMD cards and the NVIDIA cards this generation, you can push power through these cards and get significant uplifts. That's what it looks like. You know what I'm saying? So, like, meaning if the reference card is, like, dual 8-pin, the triple 8-pin will make the AIB perform, like, 10%, up to 10% better, I would imagine, with a mild overclock or a factory overclock. So, I guess factory overclocks are typically, like, single-digit, like, 1 to 3% improvement over stock reference. But then, because of the triple 8-pin, you can get up to like 7 to 9% uplift just by simply raising the power limit on these. So without even dialing up any of the numbers. So that's really nice to see. The other one, I think XFX showed like one model. ASUS had one. No, not XFX. ASUS showed off the Prime. Gigabyte showed off their OC, which looks a lot like the one on the RTX. Like the Gaming X. And then, who was the one? Oh, yeah, I wanted to show ASRock, because ASRock is doing something different. Did I get rid of it? Man, these guys have, like, the worst... Hold on. XFX teases Radeon. Well, why do they have a picture of the ASUS one? PowerColor. We looked at that. Okay, here we go. This is what I wanted to show. ASRock. ASRock is the only AMD board partner to offer the NVIDIA... Well, I shouldn't say NVIDIA, but it's basically the 12-volt high-power connector. ASRock is putting that on their Radeon cards. So the 9070 from ASRock, the 9070 XT, will come with the power connector, the same exact power connector that the RTX cards feature. So they are using it. They are fully embracing the 12-volt high power 2x6 12x6, whatever the new one is, that's the one that they're using. So this is the Taichi. This is the highest end version of the 9070 XT from ASRock. The Taichi is always their flagship. So that one, that's it. So it looks pretty good. I'm a little disappointed that they're not illuminating the Radeon logo. I don't understand why these AIBs are not lighting up their respective GPU logos. Like, they would rather light up their arbitrary brands like Taichi or Strix instead of like Radeon or GeForce. I don't understand why they don't do that. It looks like there's also the Steel Legend is always a white card. So it's got a white variant via the Steel Legend. And it looks like the Steel Legend is dual 8-pin. So the cool thing about ASRock is that if you like the NVIDIA power connector, you can get a Radeon card from them with the newer power, the ATX 3.1 or PCI 5 connector. But if you don't like it because you're afraid of the melting issues or whatever, and you want peace of mind, they have options for the traditional 8 pins. So that's also pretty nice. It's nice that they give you the flexibility. They also have the Challenger as well. So like I said earlier, I think that the new 90 series cards from AMD are probably going to be the most interesting ones to evaluate, strictly speaking, because I'm really interested in seeing how AMD's machine learning based upscaler stacks up against DLSS and PSSR. So that'll be interesting to test. So well, that's cool. So ASRock's doing that. That is not the first time they've done this, by the way. They actually have a blower style 7900 XTX and 7900 XT that already use the 12 volt high power cable. So this is their second time doing this power connector or incorporating this power connector on their graphics cards. And they're always AMD based graphics cards that have this. So that's pretty interesting that they're doing that. Let's go back here real quick. What else? So we looked at the Red Devil. So Maxsoon and Yeston are launching the SAKURA Atlantis, and Maxsoon has a new AI GA GPU. I guess these are like female gamer GPUs. I guess this is for the female audience, I'm guessing. Maybe not. I could be wrong in that statement, but the color scheme on these cards seem to indicate that they're meant more for like a female audience. But this is they have both GeForce and Radeon for these. They've got it said, I think it's like Yeston is what? Radeon, and Maxsoon is GeForce or something like that. Or maybe they're two separate companies. Anyway, these are for like girl gamers, I guess. And then we've got, what else we got? So XFX, but it's like they don't actually show it. ASUS unveils the TUF and the Prime for the Radeon. So for some reason, like, I don't know why. So I like that they do this on the TUF for Radeon. Like they center align the Radeon logo on the TUF. For some reason, I gotta go back and look at it, but I don't think they do this for GeForce. Like for some reason, they put the GeForce logo at the back of the GPU. Like over here, it's like left aligned instead of center aligned. I like how they center align it for that, but it's a missed opportunity for ASUS, because if they were to illuminate that Radeon logo, that would instantly make the TUF one of my favorite Radeon cards. Like, all ASUS has to do is put RGB on, or they don't even need to put RGB. Just make this light up white or red, and that's good enough, as far as I'm concerned. And if someone doesn't like it, they can just turn it off. So, anyway, the TUF looks good. We looked at that earlier. And then they also have the Prime, so it's good to see that they have the Prime. That'll be at MSRP. So, it'll be interesting to see where this card stacks up. Like, the 9070 XT, like how this performs, especially when it comes to ray tracing. I want to see how these things handle ray tracing. Let's see. So somebody... Oh, let's just look at Gigabyte and then we'll look at the performance number, because somebody leaked a performance number. So AORUS and Gaming OC announced. So they've got the Gigabyte Standard and they have the AORUS Elite. So going AORUS Elite. This is the AORUS 9070 XT Elite. And then they have the Gaming OC. So it's good to see that Gigabyte and ASUS are still properly offering Radeon variants, whereas MSI has kind of abandoned Radeon. And I don't think MSI is doing any Radeon GPUs this generation. So I guess they're finally done with Radeon cards. So it's like, okay, I guess Acer picks up the slack, because I think Acer is making Radeon cards this generation. Okay, let's see. So Radeon, IGN found the PC, they tested it. So somebody on the show floor managed to look at the Black Ops 6 benchmark tool. And it shows that it did about 99 frames per second. average FPS on a 90, what is this, 9070 or 9070 XT? I can't, okay, this is a, it doesn't say, it just says RDNA 4. It says RDNA 4 graphics. So we don't know if this is an XT or a standard. But it looks like the average FPS, and I don't have Black Ops 6, so I can't duplicate these results. So anyone out there who has Black Ops 6, maybe they can shine some light on where this stacks up. But it says the average FPS is 99 FPS, the low is 76, and the server latency is 0 milliseconds. And the CPU was a... Wait, is that an unreleased CPU? Why can't I zoom in? This is a 9950X3D. The CPU is a 9950X3D. That is an unreleased CPU. It says AMD Ryzen 9 9950X3D 16 core processor. And AMD RDNA 4 graphics. Driver version 24.30.0. And they were running Windows 11. The frame rate cap was 250 FPS. The display resolution was 4K. The render resolution was 4K native resolution. Upscaling off. Frame gen off. Which literally means whatever this GPU was, this thing can play Black Ops 6 at 4K native with 99 frames per second. So I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know what that means compared to other GPUs that already exist. So they're saying, okay, hold on. AMD has not shared any performance figures for the RDNA 4. It turns out some sneaky journalists. I like how they try to vilify the journalists when the journalists were literally they just happened to see it. Like, okay, like apparently they're sneaky journalists, okay, for doing their job. CES 2025 show floor found a system equipped with an unreleased Ryzen 9 9950X3D and a Radeon RX 9070 graphics card. They're saying non-XT. So do they know that for a fact? Because it doesn't really say. But you know what? It probably said on like the little plaque next to the PC, there was probably a little piece of paper there that said what the specs were on the table. So it says here, so meaning this isn't even the highest end one. This is like the cut down variant. This is not the full die. This is the 9070. This is not the 9070 Ti. So naturally, we can only speculate about the specifications of the non-XT version. AMD hasn't confirmed the specs. It is expected to be a 4096, while the non-XT is a 3584, approximately 13% fewer cores. Blah, blah, blah. It appears okay. The team, yeah, okay. It was basic. Oh, there we go. Here's a better picture. So for those of you that are wondering, so there it is. 4K native resolution. 9950X3D. RDNA 4 graphics, so it doesn't tell you the GPU. The GPU driver, 24.30.x or 24.30.0, whatever that is. So Windows 11. So this would be pretty easy to duplicate the results. The only thing that's not shown is there a preset? Like, how do you know what settings it was tested at? That's the only thing that's not shown, besides the actual model of GPU. But they say it's a non-XT. So 100 FPS average, 4K native, Black Ops 6, with an X3D CPU. Zen 5 at that. So I don't know. Okay, Okay, somebody is saying here, according to IGN, the 9070 is in the ballpark of the RTX 4080, which also, well, yeah, that means it's okay. However, even with the DLSS on quality, the RTX 4080 Super gets around 129. Yeah, that's because quality 4K means 1440p. Given the DLSS, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah. Okay, so these guys don't actually know that that's 1440p. That's hilarious. It's worth noting the Call of Duty series is typically optimized for AMD hardware. That is true, and tends to favor AMD cards, but that is also true. While there are still many variables to make a proper comparison, this is the only benchmark data. Okay, so, yeah, we'll see. We'll see when we get the final numbers. It's Black Ops. Yeah, I know it's the in-game benchmark, but I guess I don't know how the benchmark works because I don't have Black Ops 6. Okay. Well, we spent like almost 3 hours talking about graphics cards the whole time. I don't even know how we managed to do that. But that covers AMD and nvidia. The other thing, I guess, that's all the GPU stuff. So, Strix Halo, out of all the AMD CPU things that were announced, probably the most interesting one was by far Strix Halo. The thing that actually can go and match Apple and even beat Apple if you throw power at the problem in benchmarks, which is amazing. Like, this thing just completely, like, it basically pushed Intel out of the way to the point where Intel, like, I think of the guy in Final Fantasy 16, the big Titan guy, who, when that little guy was, like, ranting in the meeting, the big guy, like, literally, like, made him sit down. He, like, pushed him down. Thanks for the sub. So, you guys know what I'm saying? Like, if you played Final Fantasy 16, you know at the beginning of the game, I forget the name of the guy. He's basically the Titan. He, like, made that guy, like, sit down. Because that guy was ranting and he didn't like listening to him anymore, so he just made him sit down. Basically, Strix Halo made Intel, like, sit down. And then it went up against Apple. That's hilarious. So, Strix Halo is just, like, this is the most interesting thing that I have seen that has come out of AMD in a long time. Like, this thing is just as... The last time I saw something that was this innovative was the first time AMD came out with an X3D CPU, like the 5800 X3D. So this thing is very interesting. So I can't wait to see what sort of, I don't know, like all-in-one desktop PCs, mobile devices, whatever the partners decide to put this in. I think it's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, Strix Halo is by far very, very interesting. It shows... Basically, the way I look at it is Strix Halo, Intel and AMD, they both looked at Apple and they were like, man, Apple is so cool. I want to be like Apple when I grow up, even though they're both already like adults. You know what I'm saying? Like they both were like, man, Apple is so cool. What do I need to do to become more like Apple? So Intel was like, hey, I got an idea. It was Lunar Lake. So check it out, Lunar Lake. Apple, they're like, hey, we got Lunar Lake. AMD was like, yeah, that's cool. We got Strix Halo. So that's basically what they came up with. Because these things basically are like SoCs, just like Apple. So it's like Lunar Lake was Intel's attempt at doing the Apple thing while still maintaining x86. AMD's Strix Halo is the same thing. But where Intel went low power, highly efficient, low core count, low thread count, big core, little core, 4 E-cores, 4 P-cores, no hyper-threading, so 8 threads max, but yet it gets pretty good battery life. By x86 standards, it's got good battery life. You can put it in a thin and light, and it's very good. They went with that approach. AMD was like, okay, well we're gonna remove all the stops. We're gonna go all out. unified memory architecture, 256 gigabit per second bandwidth, up to 120 watt TDP. We're going full 16 cores. We're going to turn on all that SMT goodness, crank that thing to 32 threads. But if you want lower power, you can crank it all the way down to 45 watts for the laptops. But it's still going to be the thick boy laptop. So Strix Halo is more impressive because it shows you, this shows the efficiency that AMD has had for a long time. Like, it shows the ability to scale all the way down to 45 watts, scale all the way up to 120 watts. So it shows scalability. It shows high thread count, especially in this SoC design. It maintains SMT for really high thread count. And it has very impressive integrated graphics performance. So, and that is the whole package. And that is the reason why this thing is probably the most impressive technological feat that I have seen, not only to come out from AMD in a long time, but literally the entire CES. This is a very interesting solution, because not only is this thing good for gaming laptops, this can be used in so many different things. On top of that, it also has the AI processor, the NPU. It has that as well. And it's Copilot Plus. So it's like they literally hit every single checkbox. All the checkboxes. They did everything that Microsoft asked. They played it fair. They didn't try to cheat. And what does Microsoft do? They get corrupted and turn to the dark side. So, anyway, that's Strix Halo. That's really cool. We're going to see some really interesting devices from them throughout the year. The problem for AMD, and this was said last week, it's all about volume. You got to manufacture enough chips so that the partners will be incentivized to buy enough of them, to get those discounts, then put actual devices that consumers care about out into the market. We're talking like mid-range and premium designs. Those are the sort of things that they need to do. They need to focus on that because they don't have volume compared to Intel, and that's why they always, even when AMD is so far ahead of Intel, AMD like still lives in like no man's land, in the sense that the average consumer still doesn't know who they are because they don't have the volume. They need to get the volume of the product. And this is a challenge when they don't have their own fabs, when they're reliant on TSMC and they're having to pay for capacity and compete with everybody else, namely Apple and nvidia, and there's others that buy the capacity from TSMC. However, Intel now is also dependent on TSMC to manufacture their stuff. So that puts a major dampening factor on Intel's volume capability because they don't like paying TSMC to make their stuff. They want to do it themselves. They want the funny money. They want the internal money between fab and the chip design. But they don't have that anymore. So even though they still have to fund the fab, so it's kind of like a double. It's like a loss scenario for Intel right now. So that's the reason why it feels like Intel's just kind of fumbling and falling flat over themselves continuously right now, quarter after quarter, and with no end in sight. So, and then what ends up happening? They fire their CEO. So we'll see what happens. I think it's gonna be very interesting. Both of them have different objectives, I feel, in terms of like what they need to do compared to nvidia. These both live in a different world. But yeah, that pretty much covers most of the CES. I guess the only other thing that I was going to say, we were supposed to talk about monitors, but I think we're kind of out of time for that. The main thing that I was going to talk about for monitors was the 27-inch 4K OLED, the Samsung QD OLED. So ASUS showed off a monitor. MSI has the exact same monitor. I think there's Gigabyte has one too. I think a bunch of them have like 4K 27-inch OLEDs now. Those are like the perfect monitor to pair with a 5090 graphics card. MSI Mag, what is that? Oh, the power supply. Yeah, that's good for 5080 or a 9070 XT. No, that's fine. For those GPUs, that's fine. Okay, so I think that covers it, guys. Like, one thing I was gonna mention. So a couple things for let's talk about gaming briefly here. So Elden Ring Nightreign network test is coming next month. Consoles only. So if you have a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X, you can sign up for the network test. For those of you that are big fans of Elden, I'm definitely going to sign up for this. So the Elden Ring Nightreign network test is coming out. I think this game is probably going to come out in August, if I had to guess. So they're From Software's supposed to release a really big game this year because this is their year. So, and every time From Software releases a game, like a full-on game, not a DLC, a full game, they always win Game of the Year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. So they're going to release Elden Ring Nightreign and change up the entire gaming industry with this one game. So we'll see how that plays. So I definitely want to test this out. Yeah, this is going to be an interesting game. And then the other one is... Let's see, do they have an article on this? Yes. And, so the other gaming news, in other news, next month, Monster Hunter Wilds will be released on February 28th or 27th. Basically, the very end of February, Monster Hunter Wilds comes out officially. However, they announced earlier this week that they're going to do 2 more open beta tests. One will take place from Thursday, February 6th to Sunday, February 9th. And then they will do another one from Thursday, the following week, Thursday, February 13th to Sunday, February 16th. So you have a chance to participate if you missed the last one. And if you guys have been following this channel since, I want to say it was November was when we did that, I live streamed basically on a whole bunch of different PCs. And I will probably do the same thing because this time we can test the 9800 X3D and possibly, depending on when it comes out, the 9950 X3D, and possibly the new graphics cards. So stay tuned for that. Like I said, I've been saying this for a while. I'm a huge fan of the Monster Hunter franchise. I am ready to sink 500 to 1,000 plus hours in Monster Hunter Wilds this year alone. So expect to see a lot of weekend live streams of me playing Monster Hunter Wilds. This game will take, this is S tier, highest priority in terms of the games that I'm going to be playing. So as soon as this comes out, this will trump everything else. Silent Hill 2, Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, whatever, Astrobot, all those other games, they get pushed down the stack, and this thing literally cuts in line and goes right into the top of the line. So I will be participating in open beta test number 2, maybe both, maybe open beta test number 3 as well. We will be testing a bunch of different PCs. We will be streaming on the Godlike, which is what we're streaming on right now. So do I have that camera set up? Yeah, so we will be streaming on the Godlike, as shown down there. And we will be streaming on the Crosshair Hero. We'll be streaming on the Maximus Hero. And we'll probably be streaming on a Gigabyte motherboard as well at some other point. So stay tuned for that. We're going to be testing a lot of different CPUs, a lot of different GPUs, depending on whether or not I do actually get the new GPUs. So I haven't 100% committed to purchasing new graphics cards because I don't actually think I need to upgrade my GPU. But I am kind of interested in what these new GPUs bring, namely the multi-frame gen and AMD's machine learning and the improved ray tracing performance on the AMD cards. So personally, the AMD cards are more interesting this time around, than the NVIDIA ones. The NVIDIA ones are probably going to disappoint when it comes to pure frame rate, traditional frame rate uplift versus the 40 series. I don't think we're going to see much of an improvement in the mid-range. And the only one that will be an okay improvement will probably be the 5090 because it has so many more SMs. But the rest of them are probably going to be disappointing. But we'll see. They don't offer anything except a bunch of frame gen. So if you're a big fan of frame gen, maybe the 50 series is for you. If you don't care about frame gen, or you don't need frame gen, then you probably should just sit this one out and skip the 50 series. Or get something else. I think the Godlike is a really good motherboard. It's definitely overkill for most people, but I'm somebody that needs all the SSDs, and I'm already maxing out the SSDs, and I'm already running. I've maxed all the SATA, so I'm currently running 4 SATA drives and 4 or 5 SSD. Well, I think I'm running 4 SSDs, whatever the upper limit is on. No, I think 4, yeah. So I have 1 open slot currently. I have 4 out of 5 SSDs already in use, and 2 of them are already almost maxed out. So I'm going to have to either get another SSD or start like backing up files and draining some of those drives. So it's being used to the max. So we got a Sapphire Nitro Plus 7900 XTX. I guess we can just kind of go through it right here. So we got the Godlike 360 AIO from Deepcool. We have the LT720. We have a Sapphire Nitro 7900 XTX. We have an AVerMedia Live Gamer 4K, an AVerMedia Live Gamer Bolt. So I have 2 4K 60 capture cards with HDR. And yeah, basically fully loaded. $7,900 XT. Yeah, will be. I'll probably. So here's the thing. Like I don't know what I'm going to do when it comes to the new GPUs, because maybe I can try reaching out to the AIBs if they want to send me a review sample. The problem with that is, like, yeah, I can make a review video, I can make an overclocking guide, and I can make some content, but at the end of the day, I'll have to ship the card back to them. So if I can get a review sample for, like, the beta test, for example, then I can showcase the card that way. Otherwise, if I want to do any sort of content long term with any of these new graphics cards, I'll have to buy one myself. So that's why the Patreon members do help a lot. So if you are a Patreon member, it is very much appreciated, because your membership does help me save up money for these GPUs. Otherwise, I don't know how this would be possible. But I do. That being said, I'm still trying to get the Intel graphics card, guys. Like, I'm still trying to get the Intel limited edition Arc B580. I really want to see how the B580 handles Monster Hunter Wilds. But so far, the Intel GPU is constantly sold out. Like, you can never get one anywhere. So I don't know what the deal is there. This goes back to what I was saying earlier about volume, and Intel doesn't like paying TSMC for manufacturing because it cuts into their bottom line and their margins and their profitability. So it's really hard to get one. Other than that, I do kind of want to get the AMD card just for testing ray tracing and the upscaling. And then for NVIDIA, really the problem for NVIDIA is NVIDIA doesn't have anything that I find compelling except multi-frame gen. Multi-frame gen is like the one thing, because the thing with NVIDIA is the transformers. I already have access to that with my 40 series NVIDIA card. So I really, like, if I'm going to spend, it's hard for me to justify buying a 50 series card when the only thing that I'm getting is more frame gen. There's like nothing else I'm getting by getting a 50 series card. So and they're super expensive. So that's the reason why, like, we've done all this talk about NVIDIA, but in reality, I'm actually more interested in Intel and AMD's graphics cards. Like, at the end of the day, those are the two that I actually want. I'm more interested in getting the 9070 and the B580 than any of the NVIDIA cards. But that's the thing. So, But anyway, that's probably going to be it for this stream. So once again, guys, if you're new to the channel and you like the sort of open, free form, kind of like rambling sometimes, free form open discussion with the viewers, and if you want to ask questions while live, especially if it's a tech-related question, like the tech questions, the technical questions, like questions about memory, questions about overclocking, about CPU cooling, what GPU to get, what monitor to get, all those sort of things, feel free to ask those while live, because the alternative is asking in the comment section, and sometimes those comments get buried under other comments, so it's hard to respond to all of those. So definitely catch the live streams. So we do these every Thursday. This is Tech Thursdays. This is now episode 92. And it's the same time every single Thursday. So I encourage you guys to tune in. Even you don't have to watch the whole thing. You don't have to stick around the whole time. But I try to stream as long as possible to encompass times that people can tune in, even if they can only tune in for like 5 to 10 minutes. So if they need to ask a question, like just drop in, ask a question, whatever. I answer it live. That's typically how it goes. Otherwise, we'll just talk about stuff like this. Whatever the tech news is, whatever the gaming news is. So that's what we do every Thursdays. So other than that, I sometimes do weekend live streams, but it's not guaranteed. I may do one live stream either tomorrow evening or maybe on Saturday. But it depends on my schedule. But anyway, if you want to tune in on the weekend, feel free to do so. But do get subscribed to the channel. It does help me out. The channel is very small, so I don't really get any review samples. So I can't really make a lot of, I can't really crank out the sort of review content that I want because I don't have access to the hardware. Unless people want to, loan out hardware or whatever. And we have had people do that in the past. So that's much appreciated. But at the end of the day, I appreciate you guys tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Tech Thursdays. If not, check back tomorrow or Saturday and hit the bell icon to get notified when I go live or when the latest video comes out. So once again, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Tech Thursdays. Until then, take care, and I'll see you then.